Chapter 24-23. Within the hall, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled after Ding Xiaoyao left. He really couldn't refuse Ding Xiaoyao's help because it was too important to Guanxian Academy. Yi Xian didn't think too much about it. He sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes. The godly realm. After following Qing around the secret realm, he'd gained a lot, but he'd comprehended a lot as well. The gap in strength. There was still a huge gap between him and the big shots of the secret realm. Qing could kill them in an instant, but it didn't mean that Yi Xian could. For example, those so-called spirits weren't existences he could go against in a one-on-one battle. Improve his strength. Yi Xian started to comprehend the godly realm. While Yi Xian was cultivating, Guanxian Academy had developed at an indescribable speed after the Yang clan joined. Moreover, the mysterious Yang clan had gradually surfaced as well. In the past, the Yang clan had only existed in high-end universes. But now, the Yang clan had started to enter the sites of lower universes. Of course, the most important thing was Guanxian Academy. In the beginning, Guanxian Academy could only be considered to have a small reputation, but now it was like a plague that had swept through the entire universe. Within Shao, Qing Qiu stood on a stone platform on a certain training ground, and there were over 100 people standing not too far away from her. These 100 people had been personally selected by Qing Qiu from Guanxian Academy and the various universes. The person in the lead was Dao Ling, and beside him were Jun Xia, Shitian and Tianqi. These four people were once Yi Xian's brothers, and Yi Xian had specially sought them out. Their natural talents were absolutely top-notch, and what they lacked was resources and a platform. Qing Qiu glanced at them. Your goal is the peak of the virtual self-realm. If you want money, you have it. If you want time, you have it. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. But it wasn't long before she stopped and said, the first to attain the virtual self-realm will be rewarded with 2 billion universe veins. The last to attain it will leave this place. As soon as she finished speaking, she vanished into the distance. All of them exchanged glances and then they started cultivating madly. On the other side, Qing Qiu looked at the crowd and smiled. In the near future, Guanxian Academy would have a large number of superpower houses. A moment later, Qing Qiu left. Right after she left Xiao Ta, a woman appeared before her. That person was Ding Xiaoyao. Ding Xiaoyao looked at Qing Qiu and smiled. Hello, Miss Qing Qiu. Qing Qiu nodded. Yang clan. Ding Xiaoyao nodded. I'm Ding Xiaoyao, your brother's aunt Ding. Qing Qiu smiled. What's the matter, Miss Ding? Ding Xiaoyao smiled. I want to talk to you about the future development of Guanxian Academy. Qing Qiu nodded. Sure. Ding Xiaoyao smiled and said, now that the Yang clan has joined Guanxian Academy, it can be said to be invincible in the current universe. But according to my investigations, the boundless universe is already getting restless. Qing Qiu looked calm and didn't speak. Ding Xiaoyao continued, I've investigated the 100 Clans era. In that era there were countless clans and powerhouses, but in the end, that era was buried by the boundless universe. Moreover, if it wasn't for Master Daoist's intervention, the current universe would have been gone. Qing Qiu looked at Ding Xiaoyao. What do you think, Miss Ding? Ding Xiaoyao smiled. Our current enemy is the boundless universe, right? Qing Qiu smiled and didn't speak. Ding Xiaoyao looked at Qing Qiu. Miss Qing Qiu doesn't care about the boundless universe? Qing Qiu shook his head. To be able to be dismissive of that place. Only the three of them. Ding Xiaoyao looked straight at Qing Qiu. Miss Qing Qiu can't reach the level of the three of them? Qing Qiu smiled. Not yet. Ding Xiaoyao frowned. Why? Qing Qiu said softly, the timing isn't right. Timing? Ding Xiaoyao's eyes flashed with doubt. Then when is the best timing? Qing Qiu smiled and didn't speak. Ding Xiaoyao glanced at Qing Qiu and didn't ask any more. Qing Qiu suddenly said, the boundless universe is more complicated than you think. Ding Xiaoyao said in a low voice, I know. Even the master of Daoist can't control it. Qing Qiu shook his head. Miss, you're wrong again. Ding Xiaoyao looked at Qing Qiu. Qing Qiu said softly, the master of Daoist is much stronger than you think. For now, no one dares to kill him, including Su Qiu Tianming. Ding Xiaoyao frowned. Why? Qing Qiu said, because he is the cause of everything. If he dies. Then she shook her head. Do you know what Su Qiu Tianming wants to do? Ding Xiaoyao shook her head. Qing Qiu smiled. She wants to make me jump out of this circle, but it can't be rushed. She has to wait. Ding Xiaoyao was silent for a moment and said, "How strong is the master of Daoist?" Xianxia was silent for a moment and said, "No one can kill him under the 3 swords." Then she paused and said, "In the future I can." Ding Xiaoyao, Xianxia said again, "Miss Ding, the forces in the boundless universe are quite complicated. Without the 3 swords, the forces in the current universe may not be able to defeat the enemy. So tell your Yang clan to be careful." Then she turned and left. Ding Xiaoyao suddenly said, "Do you want to go to the boundless universe?" In the distance, Xianxia shook her head. "Someone has already gone." Then she disappeared into the distance. Ding Xiaoyao was silent. The boundless universe. In fact, she had also sent someone to go. Ding Xiaoyao turned to look at the distant starry sky with a trace of worry in her eyes. Since the green-robed man left, she had not been able to contact him. Not only her but even Su Qingshi could not be contacted. Such a problem had never occurred before. Was the current universe really going to change? Ding Xiaoyao frowned slightly. Somewhere in the depths of the starry sky, a woman was shuttling through the starry sky. The woman wore a white robe and tied her hair in a ponytail. She held a long spear in her right hand. The woman's speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, she had shuttled through hundreds of thousands of starry sky. After an unknown period of time, the woman came to an unknown starry sky. In front of her there was a huge illusory light gate. This light gate was nearly 1,000,000 feet long. Above this gate there was a big word floating. Suppress. First of the 6 syllables. Suppress. Suppress everything in the world. The woman looked behind the light gate. Behind the light gate there was only chaos. Nothing could be seen. The woman frowned slightly when she witnessed this scene. After a short moment she walked towards the door of light. When she arrived before it, the suppress character on the door suddenly trembled slightly. In the next moment, a strand of terrifying force swept out towards the ponytailed woman. The ponytailed woman's beautiful brows knit together slightly when she witnessed this scene, and then she suddenly stabbed with her spear. Boom! With the thrust of the spear, that was the terrifying power instantly dissipated into thin air. The ponytailed woman's body trembled as she directly charged towards the door of light. At this moment the word, suppress, once again erupted with a terrifying force that blasted towards the ponytailed woman. The ponytailed woman's expression was calm as she raised her hand and brandished her spear. Boom! The terrifying power was shattered. Just as the ponytailed woman was about to rush into the light gate, a shadow suddenly appeared in the light gate. In the next moment, a fist print headed straight for the ponytailed woman. The ponytailed woman's eyes flashed with hostility as she thrust out her spear. Rumble! The door of light suddenly trembled violently, and a terrifying force spread out in all directions like waves. It didn't take long for the entire stellar region to seethe with excitement. Meanwhile, the shadow in front of the ponytailed woman gradually became material. It was a woman as well. She wore a tight black robe, had a tall and slender figure, and had a triangular hairpin on her head. The black-robed woman's fist was pressing down on the ponytailed woman's spear. Meanwhile, the black-robed woman suddenly smashed her fist forward. The ponytailed woman's eyes narrowed slightly as she suddenly twisted her right hand. Bang! 2 forces suddenly erupted, and then the starry sky and the surroundings warped in an instant. A wisp of surprise flashed through the black-robed woman's eyes when she noticed that her punch was actually unable to blast the ponytailed woman back. At this moment the suppress character above their heads suddenly trembled. In the next moment, an extremely terrifying force blasted towards the black-robed woman. A wisp of hostility flashed through the black-robed woman's eyes when she witnessed this scene, and then she suddenly smashed her left palm forward. Rumble! A palm print soared into the sky and blasted against that terrifying force. Bang! A wave of energy suddenly shook the surroundings, and then the black-robed woman was blasted 300 m back. After she stopped moving, she suddenly charged forward and smashed her fist towards the suppress character. Bang! As soon as she smashed her fist forward, the suppress character trembled violently, and then traces of cracks appeared on it. The ponytailed woman gazed at the black-robed woman. She didn't speak nor did she attack. A wisp of disdain flashed through the black-robed woman's eyes as she gazed at the suppress character. This is the so-called 6 syllables of truth? How laughable. As she spoke, she suddenly vanished on the spot. In the next moment, a fist shot towards the suppress character. Meanwhile, the suppress character vanished as well. Rumble. A terrifying force suddenly erupted here, and then the black-robed woman retreated repeatedly. She stopped when she retreated 30 kilometers away, and the cracks on the suppress character were growing larger and larger. The black-robed woman glanced coldly at the suppress character and then she spoke fiercely, "You're dreaming if you think you can suppress us with just a single character." She didn't attack again and she turned around and walked towards the door of light instead. As if she'd thought of something, she turned around and glanced coldly at the ponytailed woman before she spoke with disdain, "Just you wait." As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and walked towards the door of light. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from afar. "Wait." The black-robed woman turned around and a woman dashed over from afar. It didn't take long for the woman to arrive before the black-robed woman. The woman wore a short-sleeved shirt, long pants and small cloth shoes, and there was a small cloth bag hanging diagonally from her waist. The person who had arrived was Qin Guan. Qin Guan looked at the black-robed woman and smiled faintly. "Miss, my name is Qin Guan." The black-robed woman looked at Qin Guan and didn't speak. Qin Guan smiled and said, "I want to do business in your endless universe." The black-robed woman was expressionless. "Get lost." Upon hearing that, Qin Guan frowned slightly and she put her right hand into the small cloth bag. Chapter 24-24. The woman laughed coldly when she witnessed this scene and her eyes were filled with disdain. "What? You want to fight?" Qin Guan was slightly displeased. "Fight? What fight? I'm a lady." The woman gazed at Qin Guan and was about to speak when Qin Guan suddenly withdrew a weapon and pulled the trigger. Bang! A ray of white light swept through the surroundings. The woman's pupils constricted abruptly, and then she suddenly opened her palm and clenched it tightly. After that, she roared furiously and smashed her fist forward. Bang! A ray of black light surged out from her fist like an erupting volcano. Rumble! Suddenly, a deafening rumble resounded throughout this expanse of the starry sky, and then the woman was blasted 30 kilometers away. She just stopped moving when another ray of white light blasted over. The woman was astounded when she witnessed this scene, and then she suddenly drew a circle in front of her with her right hand. Defend! A black shield suddenly condensed into form. Bang! As a barrier of light exploded apart, the black shield before the woman trembled violently, and then the expansive space she resided in started to boil like boiling oil. It was an extremely shocking sight. Meanwhile, Qin Guan suddenly withdrew a huge pile of fist-sized divine objects from within her pouch, and she didn't even spare a glance at them before tossing them at the woman. After that, she hurriedly covered her ears with both hands. Bang! 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 Numerous explosions resounded like thunderclaps in the distance, and then the entire expanse of the starry sky started to tremble violently as if an earthquake had occurred. Moreover, traces of cracks had actually appeared on the space in the surroundings. The woman with the ponytail glanced at Qin Guan and remained silent. A short moment later, the space in the surroundings returned to normal. At this moment, the woman was still there, but only her soul remained. A black talisman floated in the center of her forehead, and it was exactly that talisman that had protected her soul. The woman gazed at Qin Guan and was slightly dazed. "What's that?" Qin Guan blinked. "You're not dead yet." With that, she placed her right hand into the pouch. After fumbling around for a long time, she suddenly pulled out a round ball that looked like a watermelon. However, it was black and there was a long string at the top of the ball. The expression of the woman in the black dress instantly changed when she saw the black ball. "What the hell is this?" Qin Guan grinned. "Star bullet." With that, she snapped her fingers with her right hand, and a flame rose from her fingertips. Then she ignited the thread at the top of the star bomb. Sizzle. After the thread was ignited, Qin Guan quickly let go, turned around and ran. As if she had thought of something, she glanced at the ponytailed woman in the distance and shouted, "Run!" The ponytailed woman hesitated for a moment, then turned around and ran. In the distance, the woman in the black dress was slightly stupefied. What the hell? Right at this moment, the star bomb suddenly transformed into a black ray of light that shot towards the woman in the black dress. The woman's expression changed drastically when she witnessed this scene. At this moment she sensed the aura of death and she wanted to flee. However, it was too late because the star bomb had arrived in front of her. A wisp of viciousness flashed through her eyes when she realized she couldn't flee, and then she roared furiously as she suddenly charged forward and smashed her fist forward. At this moment she chose to go head-on against it. Bang! Suddenly, this expanse of the starry sky shook violently, and then a mushroom cloud that was over 3 kilometers wide shot into the sky and shot into the depths of the starry sky. At the same time, the starry sky in an area of over 10 kilometers cracked apart like a mirror that had suffered a heavy blow. It was an extremely shocking sight. Just like that, the force raged on for an entire 15 minutes before this expanse of the starry sky slowly returned to calm, and the space in the surroundings was repaired by an unknown force as well. Meanwhile, Qin Guan and the ponytailed woman appeared here once more, and the woman in the black dress was gone. Moreover, countless cracks had appeared on the door of light, and something seemed to be surging within it. The ponytailed woman couldn't help but glance at Qin Guan when she witnessed this scene. That star bomb of hers had almost destroyed the door of light. After all, it was a barrier that Daoist's master had personally set up all those years ago. Qin Guan clapped his hands. After that he turned around to look at the ponytailed woman and grinned. "Martial God and hello." The ponytailed woman was Martial God and Lanjing. Lanjing glanced at Qin Guan and nodded as a form of greeting. Qin Guan gazed at the door of light and then he smiled. "Martial Godin, have you come here to investigate the boundless universe as well?" Lanjing nodded. Qin Guan blinked. "Do you want to go in and have a look with me?" Lanjing glanced at the door of light in the distance and nodded. Qin Guan smiled. "Let's go." As soon as she finished speaking, she floated directly towards the door of light. Lanjing followed her over as well. It didn't take long for them to vanish on the spot. Not long after the two of them vanished, a woman suddenly walked out from within the door of light. She wore a tight violet robe and her thin waist was tied up by a silk belt. It was so slim that it could be grasped in one's hand. Her long hair hung casually behind her and there were 2 horns on her head. She was very cute. She held a folding fan in her right hand, and there was a painting of mountains and rivers inscribed on the fan. When the woman appeared here, the suppress character on the door of light suddenly trembled, and then a ray of white light swept towards the woman. The violet-robed woman didn't even spare it a glance and just waved the folding fan in her hand. Bang! The white light shattered and the suppress character exploded into pieces and vanished from the world. The violet-robed woman's expression was calm as she walked slowly towards the distance, and it didn't take long for her to vanish into the starry sky. A long time passed before a sigh resounded. King Kaoshan is finished. The midworld. Zhou Xian sat cross-legged on the peak of a mountain. His eyes were slightly closed and he seemed like an old monk in meditation. Just like that, Zhou Xian sat from sunrise to sunset and then from sunset to sunrise. A strand of sword intent slowly drifted around his body. The mortal world sword intent. As Guanxian Academy grew stronger and stronger, Zhou Xian's mortal world sword intent grew stronger at a terrifying speed. Because he was now the dean of Guanxian Academy, and everyone in the academy believed in him. After an unknown period of time, Zhou Xian slowly opened his eyes. He opened his palm and a strand of sword intent suddenly transformed into a sword that shot into the sky. A sword cry suddenly resounded in the depths of the starry sky. At this moment Zhou Xian slowly stood up. He opened his palm and the sword fell into his hand. Zhou Xian took a deep breath, and a terrifying aura suddenly swept out from his body, but it quickly dissipated. Paramount Realm. At this moment he had reached the Paramount Realm. Zhou Xian looked at the sword in his hand that was condensed from the mortal world sword intent. He was a little shocked because he realized that his mortal world sword intent was very strong, so strong that it made his heart palpitate. At this moment, Emissary Zhang appeared beside Zhou Xian and he bowed slightly. Ding. Zhou Xian retracted his thoughts and said softly, "How is the academy in the midworld now?" Emissary Zhang smiled. "Very good." Zhou Xian asked again, "What about the Yang clan?" Emissary Zhang said in a deep voice, "The Yang clan is helping us. With their help, we have now established academies in countless universes. It won't be long before our Guanxian Academy spreads throughout the entire universe." After a moment of silence, Zhou Xian said, "Is there any trouble?" Emissary Zhang smiled. "It's just a small matter. We can handle it. Yi Xian turned around to glance at Emissary Zhang and smiled. Brother Zhang, what's your position in the academy now? Emissary Zhang shook his head and smiled. I don't have any position in the academy, and I'm just assisting Miss Qing Qiu. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, then I won't give you a position for now. You'll just listen to Miss Qing Qiu's orders. Emissary Zhang nodded. All right. Actually, he didn't care about his position. Because everyone knew that he was Yi Xian's trusted follower, so who would dare to not give him face? Yi Xian spoke abruptly. Come, let's go take a stroll. Emissary Zhang hurriedly nodded. All right. Yi Xian vanished on the spot with Zhang Shi, and it didn't take long for Yi Xian to arrive at Guanxian Academy in the Midworld. Guanxian Academy was built on top of a mountain range. This mountain range was Guanxian Academy's territory, and it was extremely huge. Yi Xian arrived at the main peak, which was the main courtyard of Guanxian Academy. Just as he approached the main courtyard, Yi Xian heard the sound of people reading. Emissary Zhang, who was beside Yi Xian, smiled. Dean, this is morning reading. Just like Guanxian Academy in the Universe of Gods, we also have a literature department and a Wuyuan department. Of course, people from the literature department can also practice martial arts, and people from Wuyuan can also come to the literature department. Yi Xian asked, are there people from Wuyuan willing to come to study literature? Emissary Zhang nodded. Yes. We have an examination every month, and people from Wuyuan not only have a martial examination, but they also have a literature examination. Therefore, people from Wuyuan must also study literature. Our academy has an elimination system, and once you fail, you'll be eliminated. Now, our Guanxian Academy can be said to have the best benefits among the major forces, so countless people are trying their best to join us. Yi Xian nodded slightly and then asked, what are the criteria? Emissary Zhang said, when we accept people other than those with great talent, we will also choose those with especially good temperament and perseverance. These people might not have great talent, but if they have a good temperament and are willing to work hard, they won't be too bad. Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Emissary Zhang smiled. Dean, you've never appeared here before. This time you have to go and meet them. As he said that, he paused for a while before continuing. Miss Qing Qiu mentioned this previously, saying that you have to show your face when you have time. Otherwise, it's a little unreasonable that you, as the dean, have never shown your face after the academy was built. Yi Xian said with a smile, great. Emissary Zhang was about to speak, but at this moment Yi Xian suddenly turned his head. At the foot of the mountain not far away there was a youth kneeling there. The youth looked to be only 11 or 12 years old, and he was kneeling there just like that. Yi Xian was a little surprised. This is... Emissary Zhang said in a deep voice. This youth's name is Lu Feng. He was eliminated not long ago, but he is unwilling to leave, so he is kneeling here. Yi Xian asked, why was he eliminated? Emissary Zhang said, he failed the written test. Yi Xian thought for a while and then disappeared on the spot. Emissary Zhang hurriedly followed. Yi Xian and Emissary Zhang appeared in front of the youth. The youth raised his head to look at Yi Xian and Emissary Zhang, and then retracted his gaze. Yi Xian had never appeared in the academy, so this youth did not know Yi Xian. As for Emissary Zhang, he also rarely appeared in the academy, and even if he did, it was to guide the higher-ups in their work. Yi Xian smiled. You don't like to study? The youth raised his head to look at Yi Xian. What's the use of studying? In this world, the strong are respected, and having a big fist is the way. Yi Xian smiled. Then do you think your fist is big enough now? The youth was expressionless. Not enough. Yi Xian nodded. You're right. Most of the time having a big fist is the way. But your fist is not big enough now, isn't it? The youth clenched his fists and remained silent. Yi Xian turned to look at Emissary Zhang. How are his results in Wuyuan? Emissary Zhang said, top 5. Yi Xian smiled. You are only in the top 5, and the people before you have all gone to study and abide by the rules of the academy. What right do you have to disobey them? The youth raised his head to look at Yi Xian. What's the use of studying? Yi Xian smiled. There are many uses, such as understanding, distinguishing between right and wrong, and having one's own thoughts. Of course, the most important thing is for us to cultivate our moral character and have a kind heart. A trace of hostility flashed in the youth's eyes. I don't think these are of any use. I only know that my fist is not hard enough. If my fist is hard enough, I can change the rules of the academy. My fist is my reason, and it is everyone's reason. Hearing this, Emissary Zhang frowned. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said, "You think the same as I did before. If I give you a chance to re-enter the academy, are you willing to change yourself and study?" The youth suddenly bowed deeply. "I am willing." Emissary Zhang was speechless. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 24-25. I'm willing. Yi Xian was speechless as he looked at the young man in front of him. Of course he found it funny. This young man seemed to be simple-minded, but he was actually very meticulous. Obviously, the other party had discovered that his and Envoy Zhang's identities were not simple. Yi Xian smiled. "Do you know who I am?" Lu Feng bowed deeply. Ding. Ding. Yi Xian was a little curious. "How did you recognize me?" Lu Feng thought for a moment and said, "They said that the dean is very handsome and elegant." As he said this, he glanced at Yi Xian. "You're very handsome." Envoy Zhang. Yi Xian was stunned at first, then he laughed and said, "Let's go to the academy." Lu Feng stood up and bowed deeply. "Thank you, Dean." After saying this, he quickly walked into the academy. Envoy Zhang looked at Lu Feng in the distance, wanting to say something but hesitated. Yi Xian said softly, "Are you worried?" Envoy Zhang nodded. Yi Xian smiled. "This young man is very meticulous and flexible. He is a good seedling, but he has a ruthless and extreme nature in his bones. It's fine if he is ruthless, but that extreme nature of his, we need to guide him." Envoy Zhang hesitated for a moment and said, "What if I can't guide him?" Yi Xian smiled slightly. "That's because we are useless." After saying this, he turned and walked into the distant academy. After a moment of silence, Envoy Zhang followed. After entering the academy, Yi Xian looked around. It had to be said that the academy was built very elegantly, especially the literature faculty. Everywhere was filled with the fragrance of books. Not only that, but the literature faculty also had a strong atmosphere of study. There were more than 10,000 people in the Guanxian Academy in the Middle World. It could be said that all the great geniuses of the Middle World were gathered here. Of course, it was also because the welfare of the Guanxian Academy was too good. If they wanted cultivation resources, they would have them. If they wanted cultivation techniques, they would have them. Therefore, countless geniuses hoped to join Guanxian Academy. In order to not let their families fall behind, the major forces sent their geniuses to Guanxian Academy. A monstrous genius with a bright future would be able to help his own family. It was also because of this reason that Guanxian Academy had an extremely good relationship with the forces of various universes. Of course, the main reason was that Guanxian Academy itself was too strong, so strong that countless forces didn't dare to have any ill intentions. After strolling around, Yi Xian left the academy with Envoy Zhang. Yi Xian left the medium world and came to the universe of gods. The universe of gods was now completely under the control of Guanxian Academy. This was because the Guanxuan Academy in the universe of gods was the headquarters. Yi Xian didn't return to the academy directly. Instead, he went to the Immortal City. As soon as he arrived at the Immortal City, a woman appeared in front of him. This person was the current city lord of the Immortal City, Xian. Seeing Xian, Yi Xian faintly smiled. "Long time no see." Xian glared at Yi Xian. "I thought you forgot about me." Yi Xian laughed. "Even if I forget myself, I won't forget you." Xian rolled her eyes at Yi Xian, but the smile on her face became a little wider. Yi Xian softly said, "How have you been recently?" Xian slightly nodded. "Good." Yi Xian smiled. "You didn't miss me?" Xian glared at Yi Xian. "Don't say such frivolous words." Yi Xian laughed heartily. Without any hesitation, he grabbed Immortal Ancient. He grabbed Xian hand and walked into the distance. Envoy Zhang quickly retreated to the side. Being grabbed by Yi Xian, Xian face immediately turned red. She gently pulled her hand away, but seeing that she couldn't pull it out, she rolled her eyes at Yi Xian and let Yi Xian hold her hand. The two didn't speak, just holding hands and walking into the distance. After a long time, Xian suddenly leaned her head on Yi Xian's shoulder and softly said, "I thought you forgot about me." Yi Xian shook his head. "How could that be?" Xian raised her head to look at Yi Xian. "Do you like me?" Yi Xian nodded. Xian grinned and then she slowly closed her eyes. "Enough." Yi Xian smiled and then he held Xian's hand tightly. Needless to say, Yi Xian sighed with emotion. He noticed that he was truly a coward when it came to dealing with relationships. If you like someone, then you like them. Why act coy? If you don't like them, then you shouldn't have tried to seduce them in the first place. But if you do like them, then go for them. Most of the time, women aren't afraid of beasts. They're afraid of people that are worse than beasts. Xian Gutian suddenly asked, "How many people do you like?" Yi Xian's face froze when he heard this. Xian Gutian stared at Yi Xian and waited for Yi Xian's answer. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "When I'm with you, you're the one I like the most." Xian Gutian was stunned, and then she glared at Yi Xian but didn't ask any further questions. Yi Xian roared with laughter. After accompanying Xian Gutian for a stroll, they parted ways. Xian Gutian grinned as she watched Yi Xian vanish into the horizon, and then she gazed at the little wooden figure in her hand. The little wooden figure looked exactly like her, and it had been personally carved by Yi Xian. She gazed at the little wooden figure for a long time before she turned around and left. She was happy on this day, because Yi Xian wasn't vague anymore and he'd acknowledged her. After he left ancient Immortal City, Yi Xian returned to Mystery Observer Academy. This place was very familiar. After he entered the academy, Yi Xian saw the dean of the civil department, Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian bowed slightly to Yi Xian. "Dean." Yi Xian smiled. "Elder Zhou, there's no need for such empty greetings the next time you see me." However, Zhou Xian shook his head. "These are the rules and they must be obeyed." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "Do as you wish." As soon as he finished speaking, he glanced at the surroundings. Now, Mystery Observer Academy had expanded by at least 100 times, and it was still expanding incessantly. Because there was an endless stream of powers joining the academy. Yi Xian suddenly said, "The Imperial Yin clan and the others I invited didn't cause any trouble after joining the academy, right?" Zhou Xian hurriedly shook his head. "No. They all abide by the rules." Yi Xian smiled. "That's good." He was most afraid that those people would cause trouble after joining Mystery Observer Academy. Zhou Xian said solemnly, "They're all managed by Qing Qiu." Yi Xian nodded. In Mystery Observer Academy, only Qing Qiu could manage those people, especially the Heavenly Clan. The two from the Heavenly Clan were true Self-Realm experts. Even in the Yang Clan, they were considered top-notch experts. At this moment, the two from the Heavenly Clan appeared in front of Yi Xian. Upon seeing Yi Xian, they hurriedly bowed. "Greetings, Patriarch." Yi Xian sized them up. Then he said with a smile, "Have you gotten used to the academy?" Both of them hurriedly nodded. Yi Xian laughed and said, "I still don't know the two of you. How should I address you?" The golden-armored man holding the sword on the left hurriedly said, "This subordinate is Azwa, and the one holding the saber is called Guyu." Yi Xian nodded. "Both of you are true self-realm experts, and you're the existences with the highest martial strength in Mystery Observer Academy. So I'll leave the safety of Mystery Observer Academy to you. Besides that, both of you can help guide the students of the academy when you're free. If you guide them with your strength, they'll benefit greatly." Azwa hurriedly said, "All right." As soon as he finished speaking, he hesitated. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Just say what you want to say." Azwa said in a low voice, "Patriarch, we thought we had no more clansmen in the past, but we searched a few days ago, and we noticed that some branches of our heavenly clan didn't participate in the battle all those years ago. So, some of our clansmen are still alive in the world and we want them to join the academy." Yi Xian smiled. "Of course. That's a good thing." Azwa hurriedly bowed deeply. "Thank you, Patriarch." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "I know what all of you are thinking. Because I'm not from the heavenly clan, all of you have many worries. But I want to tell all of you that I'm the Patriarch of the heavenly clan now, and the matters of the heavenly clan are my matters. Besides that, I won't always be the Patriarch of the heavenly clan. In the future, I'll find a suitable opportunity to allow the members of your heavenly clan to be the Patriarch." Azwa and Guyu were stunned. In the next moment they revealed panic on their faces and were about to say something when Yi Xian said, "The Patriarch of the heavenly clan naturally belongs to a member of the heavenly clan. Of course, I'll always take care of the heavenly clan." Azwa was slightly hesitant. Actually, he and Guyu naturally wanted a member of the heavenly clan to be the Patriarch. But now they were very clearly aware that only Yi Xian could lead the heavenly clan forward. Meanwhile, Guyu, who hadn't spoken until now, spoke abruptly. "I have an idea. We're entirely capable of finding a beautiful woman from the clan to marry the patriarch, and the child that the two of you give birth to will be the patriarch. Isn't that the best of both worlds? Yi Xian's face instantly darkened. Are you trying to take advantage of my body? After Guyu finished speaking, he felt that his idea was simply excellent. He immediately smiled. Patriarch, I think that's a good idea. Very good. Yi Xian suddenly waved his hand. My son can't be the patriarch of the heavenly clan. Guyu was somewhat puzzled. Why? Yi Xian said indifferently, because I can't give birth to a son for now. With that he turned and left. Guyu was speechless. Give birth to a son? Yi Xian was also speechless. Every time he was with Tuoba Yen he actually didn't take any precautions, but Tuoba Yen had never been able to conceive. At first he was somewhat puzzled, but he gradually understood. His child might be the next person with the mandate of heaven. Therefore he might have to be with the right person in order to give birth. But the problem was, who was the right person? Try one by one. Thinking of this, Yi Xian hurriedly shook his head. He suddenly realized that he seemed to be a little too lecherous. Just as Yi Xian was about to leave, a purple-robed woman suddenly appeared in the distance. Seeing this, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. Meanwhile, Zhou and Guyu directly stood in front of Yi Xian. The purple-robed woman suddenly swept her fingers together. Rumble. Before Zhou and Guyu, who were already at the true self realm, could react, they were directly blasted several million zhang away. Seeing this, Yi Xian did not hesitate at all. He immediately raised his hands. I surrender. I won't resist. Chapter 24-26. Needless to say, Yi Xian was slightly dazed at this moment. What sort of experts were Zhou and Guyu? They were experts at the true self realm, and they were experts with the highest realms he'd ever seen. However, they'd actually been instantly blasted flying just like that. How? The rule of 3 days had come again. Yi Xian was speechless. After Qing left, he wouldn't be able to stay cool for another 3 days. Yi Xian restrained his thoughts and gazed at the woman before him. She wore a tight violet robe, had long hair that hung loosely on her shoulders, and had 2 horns on her head. Yi Xian was just about to speak when the woman suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he suddenly vanished on the spot. Instant invincibility. He'd directly leaped out of this current universe. Meanwhile, the woman's hand had strangely grabbed his throat, and then she suddenly exerted force. She didn't waste her breath at all. Bang! A terrifying force spread throughout Yi Xian's body. However, Yi Xian was invincible in this instant. The woman's beautiful brows knit together slightly when she witnessed this scene. On the other hand, Yi Xian was astounded. At this moment he was invincible. However, he noticed that the area armor he wore had actually cracked into the shape of a spiderweb. Who's this woman? Yi Xian didn't have the time to think, and he suddenly stabbed with his sword. 4 afterimages appeared around the woman. In the next moment, 4 rays of light slashed down towards her. The rays of light tore through and shattered everything. The woman suddenly flicked her sleeve. Rumble. An expanse of rays of light shattered, and the 4 afterimages were blasted back 30 kilometers. Yi Xian's pupils constricted when he witnessed this scene, and he was astounded in his heart. After she blasted the 4 afterimages back, the woman suddenly vanished on the spot. In the next moment, 4 violet afterimages flashed past. In the distance, the 4 afterimages that Yi Xian had released had suddenly transformed into rays of light that vanished on the spot. Bang! 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 Suddenly, the 4 sword lights exploded and the 4 sword-wielding shadows disappeared. At the sight of this, Yi Xian's expression darkened. Who was this woman? The violet-robed woman turned around to look at Yi Xian, and then she suddenly made a grabbing motion with her right hand. Boom. Just like that, Yi Xian was forcefully pulled out from that unknown spacetime by a terrifying force. As soon as he came out, the purple-robed woman appeared in front of him. Yi Xian fiercely slashed down with his sword. Not only did he release all of his sword intent, he even activated his bloodline. Apart from that, he also activated the mortal spiritual energy. This sword strike caused the world to change colors. However, this sword stopped when it was half an inch away from the purple-robed woman's eyebrows. This was because 2 fingers had caught the green profound sword. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw this, and his figure trembled as he retreated explosively. However, in the next moment, a fist smashed directly against his chest. Boom! Yi Xian's body bent like a fully drawn bow, and the armor he wore trembled violently at this moment, and then it exploded into countless pieces. Rumble. In an instant Yi Xian's body had been blasted tens of thousands of meters away. After stopping, Yi Xian suddenly raised his head and was about to attack. At this moment, the purple-robed woman had appeared in front of him. Seeing the purple-robed woman, Yi Xian's face darkened. Dimensional reduction strike. The woman in front of him was absolutely not someone he could resist at this moment. This was the first time he had seen someone who could ignore instant of invincibility and destroy Ya's armor. The big boss had appeared again. Yi Xian was silent. Damn it. Why didn't she come to find me when Qing'er was here? Now I'm finished. Since I can't beat her, I'll reason with her. Yi Xian was about to speak when the purple-robed woman suddenly flicked her sleeve. In the next moment she and Yi Xian directly disappeared. Within Guanxian Academy, Zhou Xian was completely stunned as he looked at the distant horizon. The dean was taken away just like that. At this moment, Ozwa and Guyu appeared by Zhou Xian's side. Ozwa said solemnly, "That's the boundless universe." The boundless universe. Zhou Xian suddenly said, "Quickly inform Qing Qiu." Soon within the academy a talisman shot into the sky. Zhou Xian's eyes were filled with worry as he looked at the horizon. Ozwa and Guyu's expressions were incomparably solemn. The purple-robed woman's strength was truly terrifying. They were both true self-realm experts, but in front of her they didn't even have the ability to fight back. Ozwa said softly, "It should be some super big boss." Guyu hesitated for a moment and then said, "The Patriarch." Ozwa was silent for a moment and then said, "The Patriarch is thick-skinned enough. He should be able to turn danger into safety." Guyu turned to look at Ozwa. "Are you serious?" Ozwa. In a certain corner of the academy, Gu Ran looked up at the horizon. Her fists were tightly clenched and her eyes were filled with anger and unwillingness. Yi Xian had just returned to the academy and then she'd come here. She was just about to come see Yi Xian after she finished discussing things with Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian had been taken away before she could finish discussing things with him. She was powerless to do anything, and she could only watch as Yi Xian was taken away. That feeling of powerlessness stabbed deeply at her. A short while later, Gu Ran took a deep breath while a wisp of a firm expression flashed through her eyes, and then she turned around and left. It didn't take long for the Yang clan to find out that Yi Xian had been taken away. In a certain stellar region, the purple-robed woman was tearing through space with Yi Xian, and it wasn't long before she brought Yi Xian with her to the entrance to the boundless universe. Right when she was about to enter with Yi Xian, a ray of light suddenly slashed over from the side. The woman's beautiful brows knit together slightly, and then she turned around and flicked her sleeve. Bang! The ray of light was blocked. The woman turned around and saw a woman with a sword on her back walking over slowly from afar. It was exactly Situ Tingyun. The Yang clan was aware of what had happened to Yi Xian, so Ding Xiaoyao had sent Situ Tingyun over. A wisp of a cold glow flashed through the woman's eyes when she saw Situ Tingyun, and then she suddenly flicked her sleeve. Yi Xian was blasted to the side, but he wasn't able to move at all because a strand of terrifying force had enveloped him. Yi Xian's face sank because he noticed that he wasn't able to move at all, and even his bloodline energy had been forcefully suppressed. Who the hell was this woman? Yi Xian closed his eyes slowly. He'd encountered a formidable opponent this time. Situ Tingyun gazed at the woman and chuckled lightly, "The boundless universe." The woman's expression was calm as she slowly clenched her right hand. Meanwhile, Situ Tingyun suddenly pressed her fingers together, and then a sword suddenly shot into the sky from the sheath on her back. A ray of light formed a perfect arc in the sky as it slashed down towards the woman. Meanwhile, the woman suddenly smashed her fist forward. Bang! The sword was forcefully stopped. Meanwhile, the woman suddenly smashed her fist forward once more. Rumble! The space in the surroundings exploded apart as a fist suddenly smashed down towards Situ Tingyun. Meanwhile, Situ Tingyun suddenly drew her sword and slashed. Rumble! At the instant that her sword descended, the space in the surroundings was transformed into nothingness. However, the door of light was still there. Situ Tingyun gazed at the woman from afar, and there was a rare trace of seriousness in her eyes. Because her sword had shattered. The purple-robed woman glanced coldly at Situ Tingyun. Suddenly her body turned illusory. Situ Tingyun's pupils constricted, and then she suddenly formed a sword seal with both hands. A moment later she shouted, "Rise!" A sword howl suddenly reverberated through the heavens and the earth, and then numerous ethereal swords suddenly appeared here. In the next moment, countless rays of light crisscrossed and tore through the surroundings. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The sound of space being torn apart resounded incessantly as this expansive space was gradually being obliterated. Meanwhile, the countless rays of light were actually being obliterated bit by bit. At the same time, an afterimage was growing closer and closer to Situ Tingyun. It was the violet-robed woman. A wisp of light flashed through Situ Tingyun's eyes when she saw the woman. Suddenly, the woman stomped her right foot against the ground. Bang! Countless rays of light were instantly obliterated. In the next moment, the woman had appeared in front of Situ Tingyun, and then she smashed her fist forward like a bolt of lightning. Situ Tingyun immediately raised her sword to block it. Bang! Situ Tingyun's sword shattered, and her figure was blasted 30 kilometers away. At the same time, a few dozen rays of light slashed down towards the woman from a strange angle. The woman flicked her sleeve and those rays of light were instantly blasted apart. At the same time she stomped her right foot against the ground. Bang! The expanse of space where Situ Tingyun resided was instantly blasted apart. Situ Tingyun waved her sword about and an expanse of light enveloped her. However, it was instantly obliterated. Rumble! Situ Tingyun was blasted back again. Meanwhile, the violet-robed woman suddenly flipped her right hand, and then she suddenly pressed it down. Rumble! The expanse of space above Situ Tingyun suddenly collapsed, and then a strand of terrifying force swept down. Situ Tingyun's eyes narrowed slightly as she opened her palm, and then a sword suddenly shot into the sky. Rumble! The sword forcefully blocked that terrifying force. At the same time, Situ Tingyun suddenly transformed into a ray of light that vanished on the spot. Hiss! A strand of light suddenly stabbed towards the woman, and then she raised her arm to block it. Rumble! An expanse of light was blasted apart. The woman's right arm had forcefully blocked Situ Tingyun's sword. Meanwhile, Situ Tingyun suddenly slapped her left palm against the hilt of her sword. A ray of light surged out from the tip of her sword. However, the woman didn't move at all, and the rays of light were obliterated before they could even come into contact with her. Situ Tingyun's pupils constricted when she witnessed this scene, the myriad tribulation realm. The woman's right arm suddenly shook. Bang! Situ Tingyun was blasted over 30 kilometers away. Situ Tingyun's expression instantly became quite unsightly when she stopped moving, experiencing countless tribulations to temper one's body. I never expected that someone would really be able to accomplish that. The woman glanced at Situ Tingyun, and then her cherry lips parted slightly. Her attainments in the sword Dao are passable. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around to gaze at Zhou Xian. In the next moment she took Zhou Xian with her and vanished on the spot. Situ Tingyun didn't hesitate to pursue them. However, she'd only just approached the door of light when a strand of terrifying force suddenly swept out, and then Situ Tingyun was blasted back. At the same time the door of light suddenly closed. Situ Tingyun's brows knit together slightly. Why did that woman take Zhou Xian away? Situ Tingyun was about to charge in when a voice suddenly resounded. She was only a clone just now, and she doesn't even possess a tenth of her true strength. Situ Tingyun's pupils constricted when she heard this. Chapter 24-27. Pong. Situ Tingyun glanced at the surroundings, but she didn't notice the person who'd spoken. A short while later Situ Tingyun spoke in a low voice. "Are you Master Daoist?" The voice replied, "Yes." Situ Tingyun fell silent for a short while before she said, "Why did they capture him?" Master Daoist said, "This isn't something you can interfere in." Situ Tingyun's beautiful brows knit together slightly. She was just about to speak when a woman walked over slowly from afar. It was Xianxia. Xianxia's expression was calm as she walked towards the door of light. Meanwhile, the voice suddenly resounded, "It's pointless for you to enter now unless you recover your strength immediately. But you know the consequences of doing that." Xianxia fell silent. The voice continued, "He won't die for now." Situ Tingyun spoke in a low voice, "Will he die?" The voice replied, "To a certain extent, everyone will die and he's no exception. It just depends on when." Situ Tingyun frowned slightly. Behind him, the voice sighed softly, "Every single story will come to an end one day." Situ Tingyun seemed to have thought of something and she fell silent. Qing Qiu suddenly said, "Why did they capture my older brother?" The voice fell silent for a short while before it said, "It's unknown for now." Qing Qiu frowned slightly. She opened her palm and a sword appeared in it. Meanwhile, the voice continued, "Letting him go over isn't a bad thing. All of you are protecting him here and it's detrimental to his growth. He won't have any backing there and he'll have to rely on himself for everything. That's actually a good thing." Qing Qiu fell silent. The voice continued, "He's almost invincible here. Once he gets there he won't have the Yang clan, Qing Qiu or Guanxian Academy. He can only rely on himself." Situ Tingyun suddenly said, "Will they kill him?" The voice replied, "They won't." Situ Tingyun spoke in a low voice, "How can you be so sure?" The voice chuckled, "I won't say any more. It's a spoiler." Situ Tingyun frowned slightly, "What do you mean?" The voice was silent. Qing Qiu suddenly said, "Then I will wait here." The voice replied, "There's no need for that. Go to the academy and do your business. The more powerful your academy is, the more powerful his strength will be. As for him, I beg of you, leave him alone. If I continue to care about him I won't be able to deal with him." The two women, the voice sighed softly and then disappeared completely. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes. As soon as he opened his eyes he felt a dazzling light. Yi Xian frowned and quickly got up. He looked around. At this moment he was on a circular platform and there were 10 suns above his head. Yi Xian was stunned and puzzled. What was this place? "Are you awake?" At this moment a voice sounded in his ear. Yi Xian turned to look. Not far away a little girl was looking at him. The little girl looked to be only 15 or 16 years old. She had 2 little braids and 2 horns on her head. Her eyes were like crescent moons and she was very beautiful. Yi Xian glanced at the little girl and did not say anything. However, he was calculating something in his heart. The little girl smiled slightly. "Hello. I'm Mo Ling." Yi Xian smiled. "Hello. I'm Yi Xian. You're really beautiful, nice to meet you." Mo Ling was stunned and then said softly, "You're Yi Xian?" Yi Xian nodded, "Yes." Mo Ling giggled, "You're from the other side of the universe, right?" Yi Xian nodded, "Yes." Mo Ling sized up Yi Xian curiously and said, "Don't the people over there have horns?" Yi Xian glanced at the horns on Mo Ling's head and smiled. "We don't have horns on our side." Your horns are really beautiful. Can I touch them?" Mo Ling hurriedly shook her head and took a few steps back while she covered her horns with her hands. No, you can't touch them. The horns of a great spirit race girl can't be touched by others." Great spirit race. Yi Xian pondered in his heart. A moment later he looked at Mo Ling and was about to speak when a furious roar resounded from the side. Mo Ling, stay away from him." Yi Xian turned his head to look. As soon as he turned his head, a dreadful force swept towards him. Yi Xian frowned slightly and a trace of viciousness flashed through his eyes. With a command in his heart, a sword light slashed out. Rumble. A wave of sword light exploded out and an afterimage retreated repeatedly in front of Yi Xian, and it only stopped after moving over 30 m back. It was a man. The man was tall and wore a blue robe and he was staring angrily at Yi Xian. Yi Xian sized him up and smiled. "What's your name?" The man roared furiously, "Damnable outlander. You aren't worthy of knowing my name." As he spoke he clenched his right fist before charging forward and punching towards Yi Xian. As soon as the punch was thrown out, a terrifying blue light scream gushed out like a tide and crushed towards Yi Xian. In the distance Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly as he opened his palm, and the azure profound sword appeared in his grasp. In the next moment he stabbed it forward. A cold light flashed. Bang! The man was pushed over 1 kilometer back by Yi Xian's attack. As soon as the man stopped, an afterimage flashed in front of him and in the next moment, a sword light slashed down. The man's pupils constricted as he raised his arms to block in front of him. At the same time, a blue light surged out from within his body. Rumble. An explosion resounded as the blue light in front of the man shattered. At the same time, the man's arms were shattered as a sword was pressed against the space between his eyebrows. The man was first stunned before roaring furiously, "You dare!" Hiss. The sword pierced through the man's forehead. Bang. In an instant, The azure profound sword had completely absorbed the man's soul. It had been directly wiped out. Seeing this scene, Mo Ling said with a trembling voice, You killed him. Yi Xian nodded. He hit me first, did you see that? Mo Ling hesitated for a moment before saying, He's Elder Shan's grandson. Yi Xian blinked. Is he very strong? Mo Ling nodded. Very strong. Yi Xian thought for a moment before looking around and was about to flee. Right at this moment the space-time in front of him split apart, and in the next moment an old man appeared in front of him. As soon as the old man appeared and was about to speak, Yi Xian raised his hand and slashed. Fuck. He was obviously here for revenge, so he naturally had to make the first move. As soon as the old man appeared, he was stunned when he saw Yi Xian raise his hand and slash towards him. What was going on? There was no time to think as the old man's right hand suddenly shook and a spear stabbed out. Bang! The spear and spear split apart as soon as they came into contact. Right at this moment Yi Xian's figure shook and he appeared in the universe. The spacetime he was in right now was not the current universe, nor was it the boundless universe but an unknown spacetime domain. Without wasting any time Yi Xian swung his sword down. His 4 afterimages appeared around the old man, and in the next moment, the 4 afterimages slashed down at the same time. Seeing this, the old man's pupils constricted and he was extremely shocked. He furiously roared and slashed out with his spear, using all his strength. The 4 afterimages slashed and the old man was sliced into several pieces. He was forcefully wiped out. At this moment Yi Xian appeared in front of the old man. On the side, Mo Ling suddenly said with a trembling voice, You killed Elder Shan. Yi Xian nodded, yes. Mo Ling said solemnly, Elder Shan is from the ancient faction. You killed him and the ancient faction will not let you off. Are finished. Yi Xian was silent, feeling furious. Fuck. Is there a point? Is there a point? After beating the young the old comes, after beating the old a group of old comes? Without thinking much Yi Xian turned and flew on his sword, wanting to escape. However, just as he reached the horizon, a terrifying power swept down. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and opened his palm. The Xian profound sword brought along the sword intent of the human realm and soared into the sky. However, the moment the Xian profound sword came into contact with the terrifying power, it was forced back. Rumble. In an instant Yi Xian was forced back to his original position by the terrifying power. Yi Xian raised his head to look at the sky. A huge palm print had appeared in the sky and it was floating there. Yi Xian was silent. He knew that it was the purple-robed woman who had captured him. On the side, Mo Ling suddenly said, It was a martial monarch who brought you here. Yi Xian looked at Mo Ling. Is it that purple-robed woman? Mo Ling nodded. Yi Xian smiled. She is your martial monarch? Mo Ling nodded and said with reverence, She is the strongest martial monarch in the history of our great spirit clan. Martial monarch. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then said, Do you know why she brought me here? Mo Ling shook her head. I don't know. She only told me to watch you. Yi Xian was stunned, then said, She told you to watch me? Mo Ling nodded. Yi Xian suddenly raised his head to look at the huge palm print. This was done by you? Mo Ling blinked. That's right. Yi Xian was startled. You're that powerful? It had to be said that he was still shocked, because he had thought that it was the purple-robed woman who did it. He never expected that it was not her but the little girl in front of him. Mo Ling shook her head. I'm not powerful. Martial monarchs are powerful. I can't even defeat one of her clones. Yi Xian said solemnly, Then why didn't you stop me when I killed them? Mo Ling giggled. Why should I stop you? Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. Aren't you two from the same clan? Mo Ling nodded. We are from the same clan, but Martial Monarch only told me to watch you and not let you escape, but did not tell me to protect them. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. Mo Ling looked at Yi Xian. Don't you run away. Otherwise I will hit you. If I use force I might beat you to death. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then opened his palm and a tonghulu appeared in his hand. Here. Mo Ling was slightly curious. This is. Yi Xian said seriously, This is the most precious treasure in our universe. Try it. Mo Ling looked at Yi Xian. You're giving it to me? Yi Xian nodded. Mo Ling was puzzled. Why? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment then said, "You're like my long-lost little sister. The moment I see you I feel a sense of closeness." Mo Ling suddenly punched out. Before Yi Xian could react he was punched in the abdomen. Boom. Yi Xian was instantly sent flying tens of feet away, then he was fixed on the spot by a terrifying power, and his body immediately split into a spider web. In the distance Mo Ling looked at Yi Xian. "Please don't insult my intelligence, I'm not an idiot, thank you." Yi Xian. Chapter 24-28. The little girl opened her palm and the candied fruit in Yi Xian's hand flew into her hand. She licked it and blinked her eyes. "Not bad." Yi Xian. The little girl sat at the side and stared at Yi Xian. "If you don't run I won't hit you." Yi Xian thought for a moment, then sat down and started to heal his injuries. His recovery speed was very fast and not long after his body completely recovered. After recovering he walked in front of Mo Ling and looked at her, smiling. "Is it delicious?" Mo Ling nodded. "Delicious." Yi Xian smiled slightly. "Can we chat?" Mo Ling was silent for a moment then said, "Martial Monarch did not let me chat with you." Yi Xian asked, "Then did she tell you not to chat with me?" Mo Ling shook her head. Yi Xian smiled. "Isn't that so? The things that Martial Monarch did not let you do of course you cannot do, but the things that Martial Monarch did not tell you not to do you can do, understand?" Mo Ling looked at Yi Xian. "This is sophistry." Yi Xian's expression froze. Fuck. Why were the people of the boundless universe not easy to fool? At this time Mo Ling suddenly smiled. "However, what you said is reasonable, hee. Yi Xian. Mo Ling looked at Yi Xian. She licked the candied fruit. "Foreigner, what are you trying to say? I guess you want to understand our boundless universe?" Yi Xian raised his thumb. "So smart." Mo Ling smiled. "The boundless universe is different from your side. We have many races here, but we are a whole. Everyone respects the boundless lord." Hearing this, Yi Xian was silent. Evidently the boundless universe was not scattered but a whole. Yi Xian retracted his thoughts and asked, "Why did you attack that side back then?" Mo Ling thought for a moment and said, "Do you eat meat?" Yi Xian nodded. Mo Ling smiled. "Why do you want to eat meat?" Yi Xian asked in a deep voice. "Is this place no longer suitable for survival?" Mo Ling's lips curled up. "Foreigner, you're really smart." Yi Xian glanced at his surroundings and frowned. He discovered that there was still spiritual energy in the surroundings and it wasn't bad either. At this moment, Mo Ling suddenly said, "This is the great spirit race and they are supported by spiritual veins. However, the outside world is no longer suitable for living." Yi Xian was a little puzzled. "Aren't you here? Why is the spiritual energy drying up?" Mo Ling slightly shook her head. "Because our clan developed too quickly back then, it caused us to plunder too much spiritual energy, causing us to not be able to develop continuously, so..." At this point she shook her head and sighed softly. Yi Xian nodded slightly. "So you guys have your eyes on that side?" Mo Ling shrugged her shoulders. "What can we do? It was all for survival. Just like how you eat pork, isn't it all for survival?" "Survival." Yi Xian looked around. This time he looked very far and sure enough in the depths of the starry sky, he saw countless dead and silent star domains. It was obvious that these places were no longer suitable for survival. Mo Ling suddenly asked, "Do you have anything else to ask?" Yi Xian retracted his thoughts and looked at Mo Ling. "According to what I know, the reason why you guys failed back then was because of Daoist's master?" Mo Ling nodded, her gaze gradually turning cold. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Why did he forcefully interfere? Mo Ling said indifferently, "I don't know." Yi Xian asked again. "Then why did you capture me? Why didn't you capture Daoist's master?" Mo Ling shook her head. "I don't know, it was the martial monarch who captured you. As for why she wanted to capture you, I don't know." Yi Xian frowned. At this time Mo Ling suddenly asked, "It's my turn to ask you." Yi Xian looked at Mo Ling. "Ask?" Mo Ling smiled and said, "Are there many people who can fight on your side?" Yi Xian nodded. Mo Ling was somewhat curious. "The human race's king, sacred race's king and Tian clan's king are still alive?" Yi Xian thought about it, then said, "I don't know about the sacred race's king, but the human race's king and Tian clan's king are still alive." "Wasn't the human race and Tian clan's king him?" Mo Ling frowned. "It shouldn't be." Yi Xian smiled and said, Are you going to continue attacking that side? Mo Ling nodded, yes. Yi Xian felt a headache coming on. His current Guanxian Academy and Yang clan should be the strongest powers in that side of the universe. If these fellows wanted to attack that side, wouldn't that be the same as going against him? Could this be the reason why that woman had captured him? Mo Ling smiled and said, you don't seem to be afraid. Yi Xian retracted his thoughts and said with a smile, what am I afraid of? If you martial monarchs wanted to kill me, you wouldn't have captured me, right? Mo Ling smiled and said, yes. Saying this, she stood up and clapped her hands, then said, do you have any more candied hawthorns? Yi Xian. A moment later, Yi Xian laid down beside Mo Ling, his hands pillowed his head as he looked at the sky, thinking inwardly. He was currently in the paramount god realm, while the little girl beside him was in the true self realm. However, he found that this little girl was several times stronger than Ozwa and the others. Evidently, the quality of the true self realm here was much higher than the current universe. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian turned to look at Mo Ling. Where are your martial monarchs? Mo Ling said, they seem to be busy. Yi Xian smiled and said, did she say that we must stay here? Mo Ling thought about it and shook her head. She didn't. Yi Xian was about to speak when Mo Ling suddenly said, do you want to leave this place and go somewhere else? Yi Xian hurriedly nodded. I won't run. Mo Ling looked at Yi Xian. You really won't run? Yi Xian nodded. I can't beat you, so why am I shaking my head? Aren't you looking for a fight? Mo Ling giggled. All right, then let's go play. Saying this, she stood up and left. Yi Xian followed. Great spirit race. Along the way, Yi Xian kept looking around. Soon his expression became serious because he found that there were a lot of strong people in this clan. He had already sensed the aura of dozens of true self-level strong people. This was not the most terrifying thing. The most terrifying thing was that he could feel the aura of unknown experts. It was clear that these were experts above the true self realm. And one great spirit race obviously could not represent the entire boundless universe. The martial monarch that brought him here might not be the strongest in the boundless universe. Mo Ling suddenly said, I'll bring you to a place. Yi Xian was about to ask, but at this time, Mo Ling pulled Yi Xian's shoulder and disappeared. Not long later, Yi Xian and Mo Ling appeared on a huge stone plaza. This stone plaza was not just big, it was tens of thousands of feet long and wide. At the edge of the plaza, there were stone pillars that reached to the sky. In the center of the plaza there was a huge stone platform. The stone platform was hundreds of feet long, and on top of the stone platform, there were two people engaged in a great battle. Because at this moment, there were two people fighting and tens of thousands of people gathered around the stone platform. Yi Xian turned to look at Mo Ling. This is? Mo Ling smiled. Divine martial platform. Yi Xian smiled. Divine martial platform? Mo Ling nodded. This place is a training ground of my boundless lands. Only top geniuses have the qualifications to come here. As she spoke, she pointed to a stone pillar far away. There are a total of 36 stone pillars. Every stone pillar represents a person. Anyone who is on the list is a genius among geniuses of my boundless lands. A monster among monsters. Yi Xian smiled. What's your ranking? Mo Ling's smile froze. Yi Xian turned to look at the 36 stone pillars. Very quickly, his expression turned grave. Mo Ling. Not on the list. This terrifying little girl in front of him was actually not on the list. In this instant, cold sweat flowed down Yi Xian's forehead. Damn it, not only did he not last 3 days, he even became a little brother? Could it be that he was arranged by Daoist again? Daoist, Mo Ling said indifferently. Although I am not on the list, I will be on it very soon. Yi Xian nodded. I believe you. Mo Ling turned to look at Yi Xian. Why do you believe me? Yi Xian smiled. In any case, I believe you. I feel that in the future, you will definitely not be any worse than your martial monarchs. No, you will even surpass your martial monarchs. Hearing that, Mo Ling rolled her eyes at Yi Xian and a smile appeared on her face. I'm not as outstanding as you say. As she spoke, she sized up Yi Xian and smiled. Although you are from a foreign land, you are still a pretty good person. Yi Xian. Mo Ling looked at the stage far away and said softly, these people are all very hardworking. Look at that guy on the left, he is called Chu Feng. In order to get on the list, he has already fought here for over 30 years. Over 30 years. Yi Xian raised his head to look at the stage far away. When he saw the man called Chu Feng, Yi Xian's expression instantly became serious. This man did not look very old, his upper body was naked and his body was covered in injuries. However, the ruthlessness in his eyes caused others to feel fear. This was a ruthless person. Moreover, this person was at the true self realm. Yi Xian smiled bitterly in his heart. Were true self realm experts like cabbages? As if thinking of something, Yi Xian suddenly looked at the man fighting Chu Feng. He was a very skinny man and his body was not very tall. Could even be said that he was short. However, when facing Chu Feng's storm-like attacks, this man was actually skillful and at ease. Not only did he easily dodge, he even occasionally counterattacked. Yi Xian's expression darkened. This man was even stronger because he could feel that this man was not using his full strength, while Chu Feng was already using his full strength. Boom. Just at this moment, the man suddenly punched Chu Feng's ribs from a strange angle. Bang. Under everyone's gazes, the man was directly sent flying, heavily smashing into the barrier around the stage. Defeated. On the stage, the man glanced at Chu Feng before turning and leaving. On the stage, Chu Feng's expression was somewhat ugly, but there was not the slightest bit of discouragement in his eyes. He tidied up a bit, then turned and walked towards the stage. Beside Yi Xian, Mo Ling suddenly said, "Do you want to go play?" Yi Xian said, "Can I cheat?" Mo Ling turned to look at Yi Xian. Piss, I don't even dare to speak without exploding. Chapter 24-29. Cheating? Mo Ling blinked. How? Yi Xian smiled. Why do you want me to go play? Mo Ling sized up Yi Xian and then she said, I saw you fight earlier, so I know that you have a hidden trump card. Moreover, there are very few swordsmen here. So I want to see you fight. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, then I'll go give it a try. Mo Ling smiled. All right. Yi Xian issued a command in his heart and he suddenly flew up into the air. He transformed into a ray of light that appeared on the divine martial arena. Meanwhile, the gazes of everyone here descended onto Yi Xian. Needless to say, Yi Xian's move was quite flashy and cool. Yi Xian glanced at everyone here and then he cupped his fists and smiled. Nice to meet you. Everyone was speechless. Meanwhile, Mo Ling's voice suddenly resounded within Yi Xian's mind. You have to give them universe veins if you want to challenge someone. Universe veins. Yi Xian was first stunned and then he shook his head and smiled. So this challenge is a way to earn money. However, this is normal. Reputation is important, but if they don't have enough money, then perhaps these monstrous geniuses wouldn't be so proactive. Yi Xian restrained his thoughts and turned to look at the 36 stone pillars. He looked at the last one and there were 2 large words written on it. Chinku. Below this line of words was another line. 100,000 universe veins for each challenge. 100,000 universe veins for each challenge. Yi Xian grinned. He didn't lack money the least right now. He opened his palm and a spatial ring slowly floated over to the stone pillar. A short moment later, the stone pillar trembled slightly and then a man walked out. It was the man who'd fought Chu Feng earlier. Chinku. Chinku glanced at the spatial ring and when he saw that it had enough universe veins, he immediately put it away. He glanced at Yi Xian and was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot and slashed his sword at Chinku. An uproar arose in the surroundings when they witnessed this scene. They're going to make a move just like that? Chinku was also taken aback. He didn't expect that the other party would make a move so directly. He didn't even say any opening remarks. This guy doesn't care about martial ethics. When Chinku came to his senses, Yi Xian's sword had already reached his head. Even though she was caught off guard, Chinku's reaction was still extremely swift. Her hands suddenly pressed forward, and this press forcefully stopped Yi Xian's sword. Right at this moment, Yi Xian's hand that held the azure sword suddenly spun. Chinku's pupils constricted abruptly while he was shocked in his heart. Because he noticed that the sword before him was extraordinarily sharp, and his body and strength were utterly unable to resist it. He immediately let go of it, but it was already too late. His palms were directly sliced off, causing blood to spray. After his palms were sliced off, Chinku was shocked. He lightly tapped his right foot on the ground and floated backwards. At this moment, Yi Xian's sword slashed down once more. It was like a thunderclap that didn't give him a chance to catch his breath. In the face of this terrifying sword, Chinku knew that he could not face it head-on, because Yi Xian's sword was too sharp. However, he had lost the initiative and could not dodge at all, so he could only choose to face it head-on. A ruthless glint flashed in Chinku's eyes. He stomped his right foot, and a phantom soared into the sky from his body, directly colliding with Yi Xian's sword. Rumble. Yi Xian slashed down with his sword, and the illusory figure was torn apart. However, Chinku had already retreated dozens of feet. He looked at Yi Xian and slowly raised his hands. In an instant, the space in front of him trembled violently. At the same time, the surrounding space-time gradually became illusory. In the distance, Yi Xian frowned slightly. He felt somewhat uneasy and was about to attack. Let's make the first move. But at this moment, Chinku's body disappeared. In the distance, Yi Xian's pupils suddenly shrank. He slashed down with his sword, but when his sword slashed down, he slashed empty air. At the same time, he found that he was no longer on the divine martial arena, but in an unknown world. This world was chaotic. He couldn't see the sky or the earth. Everything around him was hazy and unreal. Below the divine martial arena, someone exclaimed, "The world of true self." A true expert at the realm of true self meant that he had cultivated a world of true self. In this world, he was the ruler and he could suppress everyone in all aspects. Therefore, an expert at the realm of true self could absolutely suppress an expert below the realm of true self. Obviously, Chinku found out that Yi Xian was not at the realm of true self, so he directly displayed the world of true self. At this moment, Chinku suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian like a ghost. Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Swish. Space was torn apart. Meanwhile, Chinku vanished mysteriously. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he suddenly turned around and stabbed with his sword. At the instant he stabbed with his sword, he noticed to his astonishment that the might of his sword had actually decreased greatly. Meanwhile, a fist smashed onto his sword. Rumble. An expanse of sword light shattered. Yi Xian retreated over 10 kilometers away along with his sword. As soon as he stopped moving, he noticed that countless afterimages had suddenly appeared in the surroundings. It's all Chinku's doing. Yi Xian closed his eyes slowly when he witnessed this scene. He knew that he was within a barrier that was similar to the spirit domain. His strength was suppressed within this barrier, whereas Chinku's strength had increased. If he wanted to defeat Chinku, then he had to first destroy this barrier. When he thought up to here, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes and then he opened his palm. The azure sword in his hand trembled violently, and then it carried along countless strands of sword intent that shot into the sky. Sword destruction. The azure sword shot into the sky and tore all along the way. In an instant, an enormous hole had been torn open above Yi Xian, and he saw the divine martial arena through this hole. The real world. Right at this moment, countless afterimages had flashed towards Yi Xian. His strongest attack. Chinku was clearly aware that the world of true self couldn't stop Yi Xian, who possessed a divine sword. So he decisively attacked with all his strength. Yi Xian gazed at the azure sword that was above him. At this moment, it was too late for him to withdraw his sword, and he didn't intend to do so. Because even without the azure sword, Yi Xian was still a formidable swordsman. Yi Xian suddenly stomped his right foot on the ground and then he raised his hands. Rise. In an instant, countless strands of sword intent transformed into numerous swords that shot into the sky. Padung. Rumble. Suddenly, the entire world of true self trembled violently, and a series of explosions resounded. Not long after, the entire world of true self began to shatter. Not long after, Yi Xian and Chinku appeared on the divine martial arena. Yi Xian stood with his sword in hand, and his clothes fluttered in the wind, looking very elegant. Chinku, on the other hand, was covered in sword scars, and there was blood at the corner of his mouth. He was in a sorry state. Yi Xian lightly smiled. Thanks for letting me win. Thanks for letting me win? As soon as these words came out, the crowd was in an uproar. Everyone was completely dumbfounded. Lost? Chinku actually dared to lose? Mo Ling was also stunned. Lost just like that? It shouldn't be. Earlier she sent Yi Xian flying with one punch. And her strength was actually lower than Chinku's. Just a little bit weaker. This wasn't normal. Opposite Yi Xian, Chinku was also dumbfounded. Did I lose? Of course he hadn't lost. He just seemed to be in a sorry state. Yi Xian lightly smiled. Brother Chen, if you continue then it'll be a life and death battle. I think you're not bad, so I'll stop today. Let's fight another day. As he spoke, he opened his palm and a bottle of pills floated slowly towards Chinku. Brother Chen, there's a top-grade healing pill in this bottle. You're heavily injured, so don't force yourself. Quickly take it. We'll meet again in the future. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and flew on his sword, and he vanished in the blink of an eye. Qin Ku gazed at the pill before him with a dumbfounded expression. What's that? The others gazed at Qin Ku with strange expressions. Did Qin Ku lose or not? Meanwhile, Qin Ku suddenly spoke with a dazed expression. Who is he? How could he? Yi Xian returned to the training field from which he had just arrived. He lay on the ground and slowly closed his eyes. He recalled the battle from before. He realized that he was still lacking in many areas. Especially in the world of true self, he'd been injured. However, his recovery speed was too fast. Moreover, he'd changed into a robe before coming out. Qin Ku naturally didn't think about it. Yi Xian looked at the azure sword in his hand. He realized that without Air Ya's battle armor, his battle strength was much weaker and he couldn't use brute force. If he didn't have the azure sword, it would be difficult for him to break through the world of true self. Yi Xian sighed softly. It seemed that he'd been living too comfortably these past few days. Meanwhile, Mo Ling suddenly appeared by Yi Xian's side. She leaned over to look at Yi Xian and smiled. You seem to be quite good at fighting. Yi Xian smiled. In any case, I can't defeat you. Mo Ling shook her head. You're stronger than I imagined. You're showing weakness to me. Yi Xian smiled. Mo Ling, can I ask you something? Mo Ling nodded. Sure. Yi Xian said in a low voice. The spiritual qi in your world is already so exhausted, but why are there so many experts here? Mo Ling shook her head. We have many top experts, but there aren't many middle and lower level experts. Hearing this, Yi Xian understood. The boundless universe concentrated all its resources on those outstanding people, and those below. Mo Ling suddenly asked, what about your side? Are there still many experts now? Yi Xian was silent. Compared to the boundless universe, the experts of the current universe were definitely much weaker. The most direct reason was that after the myriad races, there was a gap in civilization. Now, the strongest powers in the entire universe should be his Guanxian Academy, the Yang Clan, and the Celestial Treasure Pavilion. Mo Ling suddenly said, what level do you belong to on your side? Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, under 3 swords, I'm invincible. Mo Ling frowned. In other words, you're in the top 4 amongst the swordsmen on your side? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Mo Ling smiled lightly. That's not bad. This means that the Sword Dao civilization on your side isn't that high. Yi Xian. Chapter 24:30. Yi Xian didn't continue chatting with Mo Ling and he slowly closed his eyes. Comprehension. After he arrived here, he noticed that he seemed to have become a little brother again. I have to improve my strength. At the side, Mo Ling glanced at Yi Xian with a trace of curiosity in her eyes. After a long time, Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes. He opened his palm and a strand of sword intent surged out from the center of his palm. Mortal World Sword Intent. The Mortal World Sword Intent had become much stronger. It was growing stronger at all times. Right at this moment, Mo Ling suddenly said, your sword intent is really not bad. Yi Xian smiled. It's formidable, right? Mo Ling nodded. It's very good. Yi Xian roared with laughter. Right at this moment, a white-robed old man suddenly appeared here. The white-robed old man glanced at Mo Ling and said, Mo Ling, the martial monarch wants to see him. Mo Ling hurriedly said, all right. Elder Deshun, take him with you. The white-robed old man hesitated for a moment, and then he said, the martial monarch wants you to take him with you. Mo Ling's face instantly sank when she heard this. The white-robed old man smiled lightly. The martial monarch really thinks highly of you. Mo Ling sighed softly. I can't play happily again. As she spoke, she gazed at Yi Xian. Let's go. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he nodded. All right. Martial monarch. Mo Ling led Yi Xian towards the distance. On the way, Yi Xian suddenly took out a candied fruit and passed it to Mo Ling. Here. Mo Ling glanced at Yi Xian and she didn't refuse. She took the candied fruit and started licking it. Yi Xian smiled. Mo Ling, is your martial monarch's temper good? Mo Ling shook her head. Not very good. Yi Xian remained silent. Mo Ling smiled. Don't try to be flashy in front of her. The martial monarch is a ruthless person of few words, and he might be killed by a single punch from you. Yi Xian nodded. I'm an honest person. Mo Ling laughed. You're not honest at all, you're really scheming. Yi Xian was speechless. Not long after, Imo Ling brought Yi Xian to a huge stone door. This stone door was thousands of feet tall and hundreds of feet wide. Standing in front of the stone door, a feeling of insignificance arose involuntarily. At this time, Imo Ling suddenly bowed towards the stone door with a sincere expression. Yi Xian was a little curious. Imo Ling, where are we? Ext Xian say, Yi Xian, Imo Ling, T. Imo Ling led Yi Xian into the stone door. As soon as they entered the stone door, the two appeared on a lonely mountain. This lonely mountain was tens of thousands of feet tall, like a giant sword standing between the heavens and the earth. It was extremely spectacular. Martial Lord. Imo Ling bowed deeply to the purple-robed lady. Greetings, Martial Monarch. The Martial Lord nodded slightly and did not speak. Imo Ling stood respectfully at the side, not daring to speak. Yi Xian glanced at Martial Monarch, then slowly walked towards him. Seeing that, Imo Ling's expression suddenly changed. She immediately pulled Yi Xian back and shook her head. Yi Xian laughed. If Martial Monarch wanted to kill me, he wouldn't have brought me here. As he spoke, he slowly walked in front of the Martial Lord. At that moment, he looked straight at the Martial Lord. It had to be said that the woman was also extremely beautiful. Her facial features were exquisite, without a single flaws. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly smiled. Martial Monarch is so beautiful. Hearing this, Imo Ling's face suddenly changed as she looked at Yi Xian in disbelief. Did this fellow not want to live anymore? He actually dared to show off in front of a Martial Monarch? The Martial Monarch slowly opened her eyes. She raised her head and looked at Yi Xian, not saying a word. Yi Xian laughed. Martial Monarch personally went to the current universe and brought me here. I wonder why? The Martial Monarch suddenly punched out, and before Yi Xian could react, he was punched in the abdomen. Bang! Yi Xian's body bent like a bow, his eyes were wide open, his entire body felt as if his tendons and bones were dislocated. He was in extreme pain. Moreover, his entire body did not fly out, but remained in his original position. The Martial Monarch looked at Yi Xian. I can't kill you, but I can still beat you up. Yi Xian. After speaking, she suddenly stood up and grabbed Yi Xian's shoulder. In an instant, she brought Yi Xian to a graveyard. Yi Xian was slightly confused. Why did this woman bring him here? This graveyard was extremely large. There were hundreds of thousands of tombs. The Martial Monarch looked at Yi Xian. Kneel. Yi Xian was stunned at first, then laughed. Kneel? Yi Xian, don't even kneel to my father. The Martial Monarch's right hand suddenly pressed down on Yi Xian. Boom. In an instant, Yi Xian's legs weakened and he almost knelt down. At this moment, Yi Xian roared, and a human sword intent surged out of his body, but as soon as this sword intent appeared, it was directly annihilated. Yi Xian roared, and the crazy demon bloodline in his body surged, but in the next moment, a terrifying power directly penetrated into his body, and his crazy demon bloodline was instantly suppressed. Yi Xian's legs bent and he left the ground a bit more. Yi Xian clenched his fists and his facial features twisted. He gritted his teeth, and at this moment all the bones in his body were cracking bit by bit. The Martial Monarch looked at Yi Xian expressionlessly, and his right hand suddenly pressed down. Boom! An extremely terrifying power directly pressed down on Yi Xian, and the moment when Yi Xian was about to kneel down, he suddenly roared and punched himself in the chest. Rumble! His physical body was completely destroyed. Self-destructing his physical body. After his physical body self-destructed, the terrifying power still did not disappear, and his soul still maintained a kneeling posture. At this moment, without the slightest hesitation, Yi Xian directly chose to burn his soul. Boom! Yi Xian's soul burned, and it was disappearing at an extremely terrifying speed. Seeing this, the Martial Monarch slightly frowned, but she did not stop. She wanted to see if Yi Xian really dared to choose to destroy his soul. And Yi Xian did not have the slightest intention to stop. His soul burned crazily, and in a short period of time his soul burned like a wisp of green smoke. Just when Yi Xian was about to completely disappear, the Martial Monarch suddenly retracted her right hand, and the destructive power in Yi Xian's soul receded like a tide, and Yi Xian's soul slumped to the ground. The Martial Monarch looked at Yi Xian. You still have some backbone. Yi Xian looked at the Martial Monarch and his eyes were blood red. He did not say any harsh words. He felt that saying harsh words when he could not beat someone was a sign of incompetence. But today's humiliation Yi Xian would never forget it for the rest of his life. The martial monarch turned to look at the tombs. These are all the people who died in the conquest of the current universe. None of my business. Yi Xian suddenly said fiercely, you invaded the current universe and only you are allowed to kill others but others are not allowed to kill you? Even if you are killed, what does it have to do with me? The martial monarch turned to look at Yi Xian and frowned. Yi Xian smiled. The first time you wanted to kill me. Just now you also wanted to kill me but you didn't. Why? It's not that you don't want to kill me but you don't dare to. Isn't that right? The martial monarch looked at Yi Xian. So you have nothing to fear? Yi Xian slowly stood up and he looked at the martial monarch. I don't care what grudges you have with Master Daoist or the current universe. I only know that you have a grudge with me now. Woman, let me tell you, either you kill me now or I will slaughter your great spirit clan in the future. Cowering? Could cowering save his life? No. If this woman wanted to kill him, no matter how cowardly he was, he wouldn't be able to save his life. But this woman wanted to kill him but didn't. There were two possibilities. One was that he was useful and the other was that she didn't dare to kill him. And he purposely provoked this woman to see why she didn't kill him. The martial monarch looked at Yi Xian, the killing intent in his eyes almost tangible. But he still didn't make a move and his right hand slowly clenched. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly said, I'm joking, don't take it seriously. After that he laid down and closed his eyes and started to heal himself. The martial monarch glanced at Yi Xian, retracted his gaze and turned to walk away. On the spot Yi Xian closed his eyes and clenched his fists. Hate. Yi Xian didn't hate her, he only hated himself. He hated himself for not being strong enough, hated himself for being useless. All the misfortune and humiliation were caused by his own lack of ability. The martial monarch came to the depths of the graveyard. In the depths of the graveyard there was a huge tomb. In front of the tomb there was a stone tablet. Boundless Lord. The owner of this tomb was the previous Boundless Lord. And back then this Boundless Lord died in battle for the Boundless Universe and also bought time for the Boundless Universe. In front of this tomb stood a skinny old man. The old man said softly, Martial Monarch. Come and pay your respects to the Lord too. The martial monarch looked at the stone tablet in front of him and said nothing. The old man turned to look and then said, That young man is the current destined one? The martial monarch nodded. The old man's eyes flashed coldly. Once this person dies, the master of Daoist will no longer be able to control everything. The martial monarch shook his head. Not yet. The old man frowned and a moment later his eyes flashed with doubt. This person has great karma. The martial monarch nodded. The martial monarch was silent. The martial monarch slowly closed his eyes. Let's wait for the shaman to come back and see if she has a way to get rid of this karma. Then she turned to the old man. Tomb Master, I need to go into seclusion for a while. During this time don't let him be killed. The Tomb Master suddenly said, Those two women. The martial monarch shook his head. The emperor and Xianxia will deal with them. Then she turned and left. After Yi Xian's injuries were healed, he stood up and left the graveyard. He didn't choose to run because he knew he couldn't. He came to the Divine Martial Arena again and without any nonsense he jumped onto the Divine Martial Arena and started to challenge Chen Ku. Chen Ku appeared on the Divine Martial Arena, and he glanced at Yi Xian. Without any nonsense he decisively threw a punch at Yi Xian. Obviously after the loss last time he had learned to be smart. Chapter 24:31. Fight. Now Yi Xian yearned for battle. Only through battle could he become stronger. Yi Xian's expression was calm when he saw Chen Ku's fist coming at him, and then he suddenly vanished on the spot. A strand of sword light tore through the arena. The space on the Divine Martial Arena was actually very strong, and it was personally reinforced by the experts of the Boundless Universe. However, the Azure Profound Sword was too sharp and even this strengthened space was easily torn apart. Bang! A strand of sword light suddenly exploded on the Divine Martial Arena, and then Yi Xian and Chen Ku retreated repeatedly. As they retreated, Yi Xian issued a command in his heart, and then numerous swords condensed from sword intent suddenly appeared around Chen Ku, and then they slashed at Chen Ku from a strange angle. The swords were extremely swift and they arrived before Chen Ku in the blink of an eye. Chen Ku's reaction wasn't slow. At the instant that the sword intent appeared, his figure shook and then he transformed into numerous afterimages that shot out explosively. Bang, 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 bang. For afterimages smashed directly onto the sword light and then the sword light shattered. At this moment a sword suddenly stabbed out another afterimage. Bang. The 4 afterimages suddenly merged into one, and then they retreated explosively to the edge of the divine martial arena. After Chen Ku stopped, he raised his head to look at Yi Xian in the distance. At this moment, there was a wisp of seriousness in his eyes. Right at this moment Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Chen Ku's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw this and he slowly clenched his right hand. In the distance Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes, and then he opened his left palm and gently guided it. Bang! In an instant, a strand of terrifying sword intent surged out from within him like a tide. Yi Xian said, "Condense." Bang! In an instant, countless strands of sword intent transformed into swords, and in the blink of an eye, there were over 10,000 swords around him. Yi Xian looked at Chen Ku in the distance and then he directly vanished on the spot. A strand of sword light tore through the air, and then 10,000 rays of sword light flew out in unison. Multitasking. In the distance, a wisp of ruthlessness flashed in Chen Ku's eyes. He suddenly stomped his right foot, raised his right hand and then slammed it down. Boom! A gigantic palm print swept down in front of him. When this palm descended, it was as if it wanted to shatter the entire world. It was extremely terrifying. Rumble. Suddenly, a world-shaking explosion resounded, and then countless rays of light erupted in front of Chen Ku, causing the entire divine martial arena to quake. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Not long after, under the gazes of the crowd, flying swords shuttled through the divine martial arena like butterflies. Tearing sounds and sword cries resounded ceaselessly. Just like that, after an unknown amount of time, the countless flying swords on the divine martial arena suddenly gathered together and slashed down. Rumble. As the sword fell, an afterimage retreated to the edge of the divine martial platform and slammed into the barrier at the edge of the divine martial platform. The entire divine martial platform shook violently. Everyone looked at the divine martial arena in shock. Had the winner been decided? On the divine martial arena, in the distance, Yi Xian opened his palm and countless flying swords flew back to his hand. Then he turned around and left. On the other hand, an expanse of sword light dispersed in the distance, and everyone was stunned when they saw Chen Ku. At this moment, Chen Ku's entire body was densely covered in sword marks, and it was an extremely shocking sight. Moreover, an intent sword was even pressed against the center of Chen Ku's forehead. Defeated. Seeing this scene, countless people below the divine martial arena fell into silence. Chen Ku, ranked 36th, was finally defeated. Because Chen Ku was ranked last, every challenger would challenge him first, and Chen Ku had not been defeated for decades. It had been years since he was defeated. On the divine martial arena, Chen Ku took a deep breath. There was no discouragement in his eyes, only determination. He turned around and left. Everyone knew that Chen Ku would definitely come again soon. Yi Xian came to a quiet starry sky. He lifted his head and took a look. He could feel someone was still watching him. Yi Xian smiled coldly and withdrew his gaze. His principle was that if people didn't offend him, he wouldn't offend them. Now that the boundless universe offended him, Yi Xian was not a kind person. A moment later, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes, sat cross-legged on the ground, and began to break through to the unfettered realm. Now he had enough money. All he lacked was time. Although he had the universe vein, he still didn't dare to use it. It was too precious. If he used it here, it might be robbed. Therefore he chose to burn the universe vein. And he clearly felt that the universe vein wasn't enough for his current realm. While Yi Xian was cultivating, the experts of the boundless universe didn't stop him. Qin Qiu had returned to the entrance of the boundless universe. It wasn't that she wasn't worried about Yi Xian, but it was just as Daoist's master had said. Yi Xian could be allowed to grow on his own. In any case, Yi Xian's life wouldn't be in any danger. Unless Daoist's master wanted to take him down with her. On this day, a woman arrived at the entrance of the boundless universe. It was Ding Xiaoyao, and there was another woman by her side. It was Situ Tingyan. Situ Tingyan gazed at Ding Xiaoyao. "Xiaoyao, can you contact Marshal Godin?" Ding Xiaoyao shook her head. Situ Tingyun frowned slightly. Ding Xiaoyao slowly closed her eyes, We have 62 true self-realm experts right now. Shaoan can be considered to be the strongest amongst us besides Yang Yi. However, she didn't contact me after she went there, so she definitely encountered some trouble. Obviously, the martial Dao civilization in the boundless universe far surpasses ours. She frowned when she spoke up to this point. We must make some preparations. Situ Tingyun spoke solemnly. 3 swords. Ding Xiaoyao shook her head. We can't place all our hopes on 3 swords. Especially when we can't even contact Yang Yi this time. A wisp of worry flashed through her eyes as she spoke up to this point. Looks like the boundless universe isn't ordinary at all. Moreover, Master de Daoist's frequent appearances might not be a good thing. Situ Tingyun fell silent for a short while before she said, Then in your opinion what should we do now? Ding Xiaoyao thought about it and said, Immediately gather all the experts in the universe, especially those from the era of the myriad races. As far as I know, although the myriad races from the era of the myriad races were heavily injured, there are still some who survived. We must find these people as soon as possible, gather all the experts from the era of the myriad races, integrate them and improve them once again. When she spoke up to this point, she turned around to gaze at Situ Tingyun. Besides that, go look for Qingqiu and ask him to use Xiao Ta to help all the swordsmen of the Yang clan. Ask him to help all the swordsmen attain the true self-realm as soon as possible. Besides that, ask him to guide all the swordsmen of the Yang clan in the Sword Dao. Situ Tingyun nodded. She had no doubt that Qingqiu's attainments in the Sword Dao were the strongest beneath the 3 swords. Ding Xiaoyao continued. Besides that, we must contact 2 people. One is the master of Tendo, Miss Nian Yen, and the other is Tuesday. Situ Tingyun spoke solemnly. Do you know where they are? Ding Xiaoyao replied. Miss Nian Yen is cultivating diligently in Tendo City. Go there yourself and tell her that you need her help. She'll come. Situ Tingyun nodded. What about 2? Ding Xiaoyao fell silent for a short while and then she shook her head. I don't know where she is as well. However, she'll definitely show herself if Yi Xian is in danger. There's another one as well. Situ Tingyun nodded. Without saying anything else, she turned and left. Ding Xiaoyao looked at the entrance to the boundless universe in the distance, and a hint of worry flashed through her eyes. In an unknown part of the starry sky, a woman in a white dress sat cross-legged on the ground, and a sword hovered in front of her. After an unknown period of time, the woman in the white dress suddenly opened her eyes, and the sword in front of her violently trembled. Rumble. In an instant, millions of unknown dead starfields were turned into dust. The woman in the white dress slowly stood up and opened her palm. Come. A sword suddenly pierced through countless space-time, and in the next moment, a sword light landed firmly in the woman in the white dress's right hand. There were 2 words engraved on the body of the sword. Rebirth. The woman in the white dress looked into the distance and said softly, Brother. She was Shao Qi. She was also Destiny in the white dress. She had finally awakened completely. Elsewhere, a woman stood silently in front of a cave. She wore a tight-fitting robe and there was a wine gourd at her waist. She just looked at the cave in front of her. After a long time, the woman in the white dress took a big gulp from the wine gourd at her waist, and then said softly, Brother, in this life I will protect you. After saying that, she turned around and left, and her tightly clenched fist suddenly loosened. In the next moment, a sword flew out of nowhere and landed firmly in her hand. The butcher who no longer practiced boxing. In the boundless universe, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. At this moment, the aura around him was getting stronger and stronger, and the space around him had begun to fluctuate intensely. It was extremely terrifying. This time he did not rely on Xiao Ta and de Daoist. Just like that, about half a month later, Yi Xian, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, suddenly opened his eyes. Boom. In an instant, a terrifying aura swept out from his body, and in an instant the space around him began to fluctuate violently as if there was a huge earthquake. It was extremely terrifying. Yi Xian stood up, opened his palm, and the Qingxian sword appeared in his hand. At the same time, countless sword intents of the human world surged out of his body like a tide, and finally into his Qingxian sword. After a moment he suddenly slashed down with the sword. A huge hole was directly torn open in the heavens and the earth. The unfettered realm. At this moment he had attained the unfettered realm from the high god realm. Yi Xian took a deep breath and then he lightly waved the sword in his hand. In an instant, countless sword intents soared into the sky from within his body. The sword intents of the human world. At this moment the sword intents around him had greatly strengthened. Looking at the sword intents around him, Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, and then he turned around and left. In a short while Yi Xian arrived at the divine martial arena. Meanwhile Qin Ku appeared on the arena and he looked at Yi Xian, again. Yi Xian nodded. Are you ready? Qin Ku looked directly at Yi Xian. Yes. Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. A strand of sword light tore through the arena. In the distance Qin Ku's pupils constricted, and he suddenly raised his arms to block. Boom. A strand of sword light suddenly exploded, and then under everyone's gazes, Qin Ku was directly blasted to the boundary. As soon as he stopped, both his arms were shattered, and a sword was directly pressed against the center of his forehead. He was completely defeated by 2 sword strikes. Below the divine martial arena, there was complete silence. Qin Ku looked at Yi Xian in disbelief. How is this possible? Yi Xian's expression was calm, the strongest under the 3 swords. Do you think I'm bragging? How naive. Everyone. Chapter 24:32. The strongest person below the 3 swords. Everyone was dumbfounded because they didn't know the 3 swords at all. On the divine martial arena, Qin Ku was completely dumbfounded, because he realized that Yi Xian's strength had undergone a tremendous change. In fact, the moment Yi Xian attacked, he already felt the change in Yi Xian's strength. However, he didn't expect Yi Xian's strength to be so strong. Now he also realized that Yi Xian had attained freedom from the high god realm. Qin Ku suddenly came to his senses. At this moment he realized that when Yi Xian fought him, Yi Xian was only at the high god realm. But he was at the true self realm. An entire 3 realms higher than him, but Yi Xian actually defeated him. Thinking of this, the disbelief in Qin Ku's eyes turned into horror. This young swordsman from a foreign land actually defeated him at the high god realm. An entire 3 realms higher. It wasn't just Qin Ku, many people below the divine martial arena noticed this as well, and their faces were filled with shock. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and the green profound sword flew back into his hand. He walked to the 35th stone pillar. On the stone pillar there were 2 large words, Lin Feng, and below it there was another line of words, 300,000 universe veins. 300,000 universe veins. Yi Xian opened his palm, and a spatial ring slowly floated to the stone pillar. A moment later the stone pillar trembled slightly, and then a man slowly walked out of the stone pillar. The man wore a loose robe and held a spear in his right hand. Lin Feng, ranked 35th on the divine martial list. Lin Feng put away the spatial ring in front of him and then he looked at Yi Xian in the distance. Without any nonsense he suddenly disappeared on the spot. Swish. The space in front of Yi Xian suddenly exploded, and in the next moment, a cold light directly pierced the space between Yi Xian's eyebrows. Yi Xian suddenly slashed down with his sword. Rumble. With a loud bang, Lin Feng was pushed back hundreds of feet by Yi Xian's sword. After Lin Feng stopped he looked at the long spear in his hand. With a cracking sound the long spear broke into pieces. Seeing his spear shatter, Lin Feng was stunned. In the next moment he looked at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. Right at this moment Yi Xian suddenly disappeared on the spot. A ray of sword light tore through the battlefield. In the distance Lin Feng's expression instantly changed drastically. His body trembled and he was about to retreat. However, Yi Xian's sword was even faster. In the blink of an eye, it had already arrived before him, leaving him with nowhere to retreat. Lin Feng stopped retreating. His palms suddenly overlapped each other and then pulled upwards. In an instant, countless spear shadows soared into the sky, directly enveloping him and Yi Xian. Boom! Right at this moment, an enormous bang suddenly resounded from the divine martial arena, and then countless spear images were blasted apart. At the same time, a figure was blasted flying and smashed heavily against the barrier. This figure was Lin Feng. Just as Lin Feng smashed into the barrier, a sword suddenly pressed against his forehead. It was over. Below the divine martial arena, there was dead silence. Lin Feng was defeated just like that. Everyone was still somewhat unable to accept the reality before their eyes. The powerful Lin Feng was actually defeated in just 2 moves. On the divine martial arena, Lin Feng glanced at the azure profound sword in Yi Xian's hand and remained silent. He knew that the reason he lost so quickly was largely because of this sword. It was because he couldn't block this sword at all. Of course, a loss was a loss. Lin Feng glanced at Yi Xian. I've lost. With that he turned around and left. Lost. Below the divine martial arena, everyone looked at Yi Xian with complicated expressions. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly looked at the 34th person. A stone pillar. Witnessing this scene, someone exclaimed, "He wants to challenge Wu Qing." As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Xian opened his palm, and a spatial ring slowly floated in front of the stone pillar. Not long after, the stone pillar slightly trembled and soon, a man slowly walked out of the stone pillar. Wu Qing. 34th on the divine martial ranking. Wu Qing looked at Yi Xian. Swordsman. Yi Xian nodded. Wu Qing nodded slightly. Come, let me see a genius from the other side. As soon as he finished speaking, his body suddenly became illusory. In the distance, Yi Xian slightly frowned and blocked with his sword. Boom. A red thread that was as thin as a hair blasted against the azure profound sword. The azure profound sword trembled violently, and Yi Xian felt his arm go numb. At this moment, a red thread directly appeared between his eyebrows. Very fast. Yi Xian's reaction was also very fast. He dodged sideways and dodged the red thread by a hair's breadth. But at this moment the space he was in suddenly filled with countless red threads. These red threads were like a net that completely enveloped him. Yi Xian slightly closed his eyes, turned around and swept the azure profound sword in his hand. A wave of sword light vibrated, and in an instant the countless red threads were shattered. At this moment, countless red threads suddenly appeared all around. These red threads were dense and endless, and they covered the entire divine martial arena. Yi Xian's expression was calm. He opened his palm and the azure profound sword suddenly flew out. At the same time, countless human sword intents turned into swords and slashed out. In an instant, the entire divine martial arena was filled with scalp-numbing tearing sounds. Countless red threads and sword lights crisscrossed, dazzling the audience's eyes. Even though the red threads were boundless, Yi Xian's sword was even sharper, and it caused the red threads to be unable to approach him at all. Right when they were in a deadlock, Wu Qing suddenly vanished on the spot, and then the space in the surroundings suddenly became illusory. The realm of true self. In the distance, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. A moment later he suddenly rushed forward and slashed down with his sword. A sword light slashed down. Boom. Suddenly Wu Qing's realm of true self shattered, and at the same time, countless red threads were annihilated. Wu Qing was shocked and he was about to retreat, but at this moment, a ray of sword light had already arrived between his eyebrows. The entire divine martial arena regained its calm. Wu Qing was defeated. At this moment, the audience no longer had the disbelief they had before. Only mixed feelings remained. Yi Xian's strength was stronger than they had expected. Wu Qing looked at Yi Xian. I lost. Yi Xian opened his palm, put away the green profound sword and then turned to leave. Under the watchful eyes of the audience, Yi Xian disappeared at the end of the horizon. In the arena the audience looked at each other. They knew that Yi Xian would definitely come again. Somewhere an old man watched Yi Xian disappear in the distance and he was silent. This old man was the tomb owner. He didn't stop Yi Xian from challenging the divine martial arena because Yi Xian was the top genius of the current universe. Now, letting a genius of the boundless universe compete with Yi Xian was not a bad thing. However, the speed at which Yi Xian's strength increased was a bit beyond his expectations. And he also found one thing. That was, Yi Xian was challenging people at a higher level. After a moment of silence, the tomb owner turned to leave. He still didn't choose to stop Yi Xian. He wanted to see how great Yi Xian's potential was. In any case, the geniuses on the divine martial list that Yi Xian was challenging were not the best in the boundless universe. Yi Xian came to a starry sky. He sat down cross-legged and slowly closed his eyes. Get up. He found that he didn't need to rely on sword skills when fighting with others. He just relied on pure strength and speed. As long as he was strong enough and fast enough, it was better than some sword skills. Of course, instant of invincibility was still his strongest sword skill. Yi Xian looked around. He knew that someone was secretly watching him. However, the opponent was too strong and he couldn't feel him. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Enlightenment. Every day besides fighting crazily he was enlightenment. Fighting could make his reaction speed faster because only in a moment of life and death could a person better stimulate his potential. After the battle he needed to comprehend again. He needed to comprehend his opponent, himself, and the sword Dao. In the starry sky Xian closed his eyes. Around him the mortal world sword intent floated. His current use of the mortal world sword intent was far better than before. He also found that there were many wonderful things about it. The mortal world sword intent was the power of faith. To a certain extent, it couldn't be considered his own strength. Because if others no longer believed in him, the mortal world sword intent would disappear. Thinking of this, Xian frowned slightly. The people believed in him. Then what did he believe in? Qing. Xian fell silent. No. This method wasn't right. He should believe in himself and not pin his faith on others. Just like now, if Qing wasn't here, what should he do? He could only believe in himself. If he didn't believe in himself, how could others believe in him? Thinking of this, Xian suddenly used the heart clarity divine power. Boom. Suddenly the mortal world sword intent around Xian started seething. At this moment his mortal world sword intent gained another strand of faith, and it wasn't someone else's but his own. True self? Such a thought suddenly appeared in Xian's mind. Wasn't the so-called true self about understanding one's heart, subduing it and believing in it? A short moment later Xian suddenly shook his head and smiled. Bang! The mortal world sword intent surged out madly from within Xian's body, and it was gradually undergoing a qualitative change. The end of the path of faith was oneself. Moreover, he'd actually understood this principle by accident. Xian calmed himself down and waited for his sword intent to break through. He knew that he'd be at the true self realm when his sword intent broke through. Right at this moment, a man suddenly appeared not too far away from Xian. The man sized up Xian and said, "You're the Xian from the other world." Xian glanced at the man and didn't say a word. The man sneered, "Let me introduce myself. I'm Zhang Ming, ranked 30th on the divine martial list. I heard that you're pretty good, so I'm here too." The green profound sword floating in front of Xian suddenly disappeared. The man's pupils suddenly constricted and he charged forward and punched out. Boom! A wave of sword light exploded, and the man was sent flying hundreds of thousands of feet away. As soon as the man stopped, an intent sword was already pressed against his forehead. Zhang Ming was stunned. Xian glanced at the dumbfounded Zhang Ming. "Do you think that I'm very weak?" Zhang Ming. "P.S. Thank you for the generous rewards this month from Vast Deep Mist. Brother, you've given too many rewards. I sincerely thank you. I'm very ashamed. You single-handedly ensured that I'm in the top 10. And all the readers' rewards and support, thank you. Recently I've been slowly adjusting and I won't add more. I hope to write a better one. Even if I want to end, I won't end it hastily. Thank you for your support." Chapter 24:33. It had to be said that Zhang Ming was dumbfounded. One sword. He did not expect Xian's sword attack to be so powerful that it directly shattered his right hand. He did not expect that the person in front of him was actually so powerful. Without thinking much, Zhang Ming quickly said, "I've lost." Admit defeat. He had to admit defeat. After all, it wasn't a battle of life and death. There was no need to be stubborn. Plus, he had really lost. If he couldn't win, he would be courting death. He didn't want to die yet. Seeing that Zhang Ming had admitted defeat, Xian didn't waste any more words. He opened his palm and the sword between Zhang Ming's eyebrows flew back into his hand. Zhang Ming glanced at Xian, his eyes full of fear. He didn't say anything and turned to leave. Somewhere in the dark, the tomb owner looked at Xian in silence. How could he not see that Xian was trying to break through to the realm of true self? He was actually a bit shocked. One should know that when Xian came he was only at the upper immortal realm. But now Xian was about to reach the realm of true self. Moreover, he was going to skip the virtual self realm. Could it be played like this? The tomb owner looked at Xian in the distance with a calm expression. Xian was excellent, but there were many excellent geniuses in the boundless universe. Therefore he didn't want to kill him. At this moment in the distance Xian suddenly stood up slowly. Boom. In an instant the star region where Xian was at boiled. At that moment Xian's human realm sword essence also underwent an earth-shattering change. True self. In the distance Xian opened his eyes slowly. He lifted his head and looked into the distance. He saw the tomb owner right away. Now he could feel the tomb owner. Seeing Yi Xian look over, the tomb owner's expression was calm. Yi Xian smiled. Then he turned around and left. He didn't attack the tomb owner because even though he had reached the realm of true self, he knew that he was no match for the old man and the martial lord. Soon Yi Xian arrived at the divine martial arena. Seeing Yi Xian come to the divine martial arena again, some of the people guarding the divine martial arena suddenly became excited. Yi Xian was here again. Who is Yi Xian going to challenge this time? Everyone was very curious. Under the gazes of everyone present, Yi Xian opened his palm, and then a spatial ring slowly floated towards one of the stone pillars. When they saw where the spatial ring had landed, everyone's eyes opened wide and their eyes were filled with disbelief. The first one. Yi Xian wanted to challenge the first on the divine martial list. Number 1 on the divine martial list. Nailin Ming. He had dominated the rankings for countless years, and no one had ever been able to shake him. Nailin Ming. The Nailin clan was one of the 6 great clans of the boundless universe. They were ranked second amongst the 6 great clans, above the ancient spirit clan. Nailin Ming was hailed as the most monstrous genius in the history of the Nailin clan, one of the 2 supreme monstrous geniuses of the boundless universe. No one had expected Yi Xian to challenge Nailin Ming, who ranked first. The tomb owner, who was hiding in the dark, also did not expect this. He was very surprised. The news of Yi Xian challenging Nailin Ming quickly spread, and before long, tens of thousands of people gathered below the divine martial stage. Now that they knew Yi Xian's identity, they knew that he was a genius from a foreign world. Many people's eyes were filled with hatred towards Yi Xian. After all, the boundless universe and the current universe had a tragic war in the past. Under everyone's gazes, the first stone pillar trembled slightly. Very quickly, a woman slowly walked out. The woman was wearing a black, tight-fitting robe. There were no patterns on the entire robe. It was very simple and plain. Her long hair was casually draped over her back. However, the ends of her hair were tied with a ribbon. Her ears were different from ordinary people's and they were slightly larger. Moreover, her eyes were dark blue. Nailin Ming. In the arena, someone suddenly cheered. Not long after, the crowd erupted. In the eyes of the younger generation, Nailin Ming and Bei Fangqing were existences akin to gods. After Nailin Ming walked out, she glanced at Yi Xian with a calm expression. Yi Xian looked at Nailin Ming with a calm expression, but he was secretly on guard because he realized that he could not sense the woman in front of him. It was as if she did not exist. Not simple. Of course, this was exactly what he wanted. Right now he was no longer interested in acting tough. He only wanted to become stronger. Nailin Ming suddenly walked slowly towards Yi Xian. As soon as her foot landed, an extremely terrifying aura suddenly crushed towards Yi Xian like a mountain. Boom. In an instant, the entire divine martial stage exploded and was annihilated. The entire divine martial stage's enchantment and array formation could not withstand it. In the arena, everyone was shocked and quickly retreated. At this moment, 4 mysterious black-robed men suddenly appeared. The 4 of them raised their hands and gently pressed down. With this pressure, the terrifying aura released by Nailin Ming was immediately restrained in the area of the divine martial stage. In front of Nailin Ming, Yi Xian's expression was calm. He opened his palm and a wave of sword energy gushed out. Boom. This wave of sword energy forcibly resisted Nailin Ming's aura. However, at this moment Nailin Ming took another step forward. Boom. The power of the aura suddenly multiplied. It directly doubled. Boom. Yi Xian's sword energy was directly suppressed and forced to retreat. Yi Xian was shocked. He opened his palm and the opponent's sword energy suddenly gushed out and merged with his own sword energy. Using sword energy as energy. With the addition of the human realm sword energy, Yi Xian's sword energy instantly increased, and then it once again resisted Nailin Ming's aura. However, at this moment Nailin Ming took another step forward. Boom. In an instant the power of the aura doubled again. Boom. At this moment the 4 mysterious elders were directly forced back thousands of feet. They were shocked and quickly tried to suppress it again. However, they were shocked to find that they could not suppress it at all. As the main target of this aura, Yi Xian's human realm sword energy was directly crushed. The aura was like the sky falling on Yi Xian. Boom. In an instant Yi Xian suffocated. His body felt like it was about to be crushed and he was unable to move. In the distance, Nalan Ming looked at Yi Xian with a calm expression and did not move forward again. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly raised his head. He opened his palm and in an instant, countless human realm sword energy surged out of his body. Buzz. The sound of a sword suddenly resounded between the heavens and the earth. In the next moment, Nalan Ming's aura was directly torn open by Yi Xian's human realm sword energy. As soon as this opening was opened, Yi Xian immediately felt his body relax. However, at this moment Nalan Ming took another step forward. Boom. In an instant the power of the aura doubled again. Yi Xian's pupils constricted, and his human realm sword energy was forcefully pushed back into his body. At the same time his body actually started to shatter bit by bit. Yi Xian was extremely shocked. This aura was absolutely the strongest he'd ever seen. As for Qing usually didn't play around like this and he would always attack anyone he encountered. At this moment Yi Xian didn't dare hold back any longer, and he directly activated his bloodline. Bang! A powerful bloodline power swept out from his body. When this bloodline power appeared his human realm sword intent surged out as well. As soon as they fused together, Nalan Ming's aura was instantly forced back, and the space in the surroundings started to be obliterated bit by bit. Their strength was truly too terrifying, and the space here wasn't able to endure their strength at all. A trace of surprise flashed through Nalan Ming's eyes when she saw Yi Xian's bloodline energy, but she didn't speak and just took another step forward. Bang! Nalan Ming's aura doubled once more. It doubled again. In an instant Yi Xian's bloodline energy and human realm sword energy were suppressed once more. Yi Xian's face fell when he witnessed this scene. Is this woman really that abnormal? She doubled it with just a single step? Yi Xian's bloodline energy and human realm sword energy were being suppressed to the point of being pushed back repeatedly. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes when he witnessed this scene. He still hadn't. It didn't take long for Nalan Ming's aura to suppress Yi Xian's bloodline energy and human realm sword energy to arrive before him. At this moment he could clearly sense how terrifying that aura was. Yi Xian had an extremely solemn expression on his face. If that aura were to press down upon him right now, then his soul would be instantly obliterated. His body and soul were utterly unable to endure such a terrifying force. Right at this moment, Nalan Ming suddenly took another step forward from afar. Rumble. In an instant that aura suddenly rose explosively, and its might hadn't just doubled, it had multiplied by a few times. Yi Xian's bloodline energy and human realm sword energy were directly suppressed back into his body, and then Yi Xian's pupils constricted. At this moment he had no choice but to attack, and the green profound sword in his hand suddenly shot into the sky. That aura was directly torn apart by the green profound sword. In the next moment Yi Xian had left the universe and entered another space. At practically the exact same moment, the aura that Nalan Ming emanated pressed down upon him. Bang! Yi Xian's figure trembled violently, but he wasn't harmed at all. At this moment he was invincible. Instant of invincibility. A trace of surprise flashed through Nalan Ming's eyes when she witnessed this scene, and then she gazed at Yi Xian with a trace of curiosity in her eyes. Yi Xian suddenly attacked from afar. Along with the sound of a sword howling, 4 afterimages suddenly appeared around Nalan Ming, and the 4 afterimages fiercely slashed down with swords in their hands. Instant of invincibility. At the instant that the 4 swords slashed down in unison, Nalan Ming suddenly raised her right hand and pressed it down lightly. Rumble. In an instant the 4 rays of light were blasted apart, and the 4 afterimages were blasted over 30 kilometers away. After they stopped moving they started to slowly disperse, and it wasn't long before they completely vanished from the field of vision of the spectators. Meanwhile Yi Xian appeared in front of Nalan Ming. Nalan Ming raised her head to gaze at Yi Xian, and she was just about to attack when Yi Xian suddenly said, "Thanks for letting me win." "Let me win?" Nalan Ming was slightly stunned. Everyone in the surroundings was bewildered. Did he win? Did Yi Xian win? All the spectators were bewildered and even Nalan Ming was bewildered. Did I lose? Meanwhile someone in the crowd below spoke abruptly. Fuck. How shameless. 7017K. Chapter 2434. Needless to say all the spectators were stunned. What's going on? Has Nalan Ming lost? Obviously she hasn't. Moreover, Nalan Ming had always been occupying the upper hand in their battle. As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Xian turned around and was about to leave on his sword. However, a terrifying aura suddenly enveloped him. Yi Xian stopped moving and then he turned around to gaze at Nalan Ming. "What's wrong?" Nalan Ming gazed at Yi Xian and said, "Continue." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Why?" Nalan Ming looked Yi Xian in the eyes and said, "We haven't decided on a victor." Yi Xian grinned and said, "Then let's continue." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly charged forward with the green profound sword in hand. As soon as he charged forward, the aura that Nalan Ming emanated was instantly torn apart by a single swing of his sword, and then his sword was like a thunderclap that instantly arrived before Nalan Ming. This strike was capable of obliterating the heavens and the earth. Nalan Ming's expression was calm, and she suddenly flipped her palm open at the instant that his sword slashed down. Bang! The spectators watched as an expanse of sword light shattered, and then Yi Xian retreated explosively by 3 kilometers. Yi Xian hadn't even stopped moving when a fist smashed down towards him. As soon as this fist smashed down, the space in the surroundings started seething, and then it gradually vanished. Everything was obliterated by a single punch. Yi Xian's pupils constricted when he sensed the terrifying strength contained within this punch. "If I'm struck by this punch, then I'll probably accompany Tianyi right away, right?" At this critical moment, Yi Xian had no choice but to utilize instant of invincibility again. Because he had nowhere to retreat to and it was impossible for him to dodge. However, if he were to go head-on against this attack, then even if he didn't die he would still suffer a horrible fate. This woman's fist was simply too terrifying. As soon as Yi Xian escaped from this expansive space, the fist had already smashed down, and Yi Xian's body forcefully endured it. Bang! Yi Xian's body trembled violently, but he was not injured in the slightest. Nalan Ming frowned slightly when she witnessed this scene. She knew very well the strength of her punch. Not to mention Yi Xian, it could even shatter a universe. However, Yi Xian was completely unharmed. Right when Nalan Ming was feeling puzzled, 4 afterimages suddenly appeared around her. In the next moment, 4 rays of sword light slashed down. Chi-chi-chi-chi. 4 ripping sounds suddenly resounded. Nalan Ming suddenly raised her right hand and then slammed it down. Boom. In an instant, the 4 sword lights were completely shattered. The 4 afterimages were pushed back hundreds of thousands of feet by a frightening force. The moment they stopped, the 4 afterimages were completely destroyed. At the same time, a sword suddenly appeared in front of Nalan Ming. The Azure Profound Sword. Nalan Ming suddenly raised her right hand and made a grabbing motion. Boom. The Azure Profound Sword was actually forcefully caught in her hand. In the distance, Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly. With a command in his heart, the Azure Profound Sword trembled violently and spun. Nalan Ming frowned slightly. She loosened her grip and moved her body slightly to the side. The Azure Profound Sword flew past the tip of her nose, but in the next moment the Azure Profound Sword turned around and slashed down again. Nalan Ming suddenly pressed her fingers together, and then she lightly swept them to the right at a strange angle. This sweep actually swept accurately onto the body of the Azure Profound Sword. Bang! The Azure Profound Sword was directly blasted away. Yi Xian opened his palm and the Azure Profound Sword flew back into his hand. At this moment, Nalan Ming suddenly appeared in front of him like a ghost. She turned around and swept her leg towards Yi Xian. Bang! This sweep caused countless pieces of space to shatter, and the powerful force directly blasted all the spectating experts back 30 kilometers. Yi Xian's pupils constricted. He didn't dare go head-on against this woman's strength, so he immediately utilized his instant of invincibility. Bang! Nalan Ming's leg directly swept onto Yi Xian's shoulder. Rumble! Yi Xian's body suddenly trembled, but he was not injured in the slightest. Almost at the same time, Yi Xian slashed at Nalan Ming's head with his sword. However, this sword slashed empty air, because Nalan Ming did not know when she had already retreated hundreds of meters away. After stopping, Nalan Ming looked at Yi Xian, and her beautiful eyebrows furrowed again. What kind of divine art is this? Yi Xian held the Azure Profound Sword in his hand and waved it gently. The sword light flashed and he smiled slightly. Instant of invincibility. The moment I draw my sword, I am invincible. Nalan Ming looked at Yi Xian. You created this yourself? Yi Xian thought about it and then nodded. You can think of it that way. Little soul, Nalan Ming nodded slightly. Very good. But you can't use it infinitely, right? As she spoke, she slowly clenched her right hand, and a terrifying force once again swept towards Yi Xian. In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly raised his hand and slashed down with his sword. As the sword slashed down, the force was torn apart again, but the next moment, a shadow swept over his head. Nalan Ming lifted her right foot and stomped down. Boom. This stomp seemed to be crushing the entire universe. It was extremely frightening. Yi Xian squinted his eyes and used instant of invincibility again. Boom. Yi Xian's body suddenly trembled, and he once again withstood Nalan Ming's terrifying force. Nalan Ming retreated to a distance. She looked at Yi Xian and frowned. Just as she was about to attack again, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Let's call it a day." As he finished speaking, he turned around and disappeared on the spot. Nalan Ming was stunned. He left just like that. Below the divine martial arena, the crowd was also stunned. Did he just call it a day? Was he playing house? Of course, the most important thing was who won. On the divine martial arena, Nalan Ming looked into the distance and was silent. In fact, she had already felt Yi Xian's true strength. If not for that sword skill, Yi Xian's current strength would not be enough to contend with her. But that sword skill, Nalan Ming frowned deeply. In those few moments just now, Yi Xian had withstood all of her force without a scratch. This was not normal. After a moment of silence, Nalan Ming turned around and left. The news of Yi Xian challenging Nalan Ming quickly spread throughout the boundless universe. One should know that Nalan Ming was one of the two super geniuses in the boundless universe. She was a god in the eyes of the younger generation in the boundless universe. Yet Yi Xian was able to challenge her. Most importantly, he did not lose. Did Yi Xian lose? Seemed like not. Because Yi Xian ran away while fighting. Therefore very quickly the boundless universe spread the news that Yi Xian and Nalan Ming were evenly matched. Moreover, the more it spread, the more ridiculous it became. Some even said that Yi Xian had suppressed Nalan Ming. In short, Yi Xian was now completely famous in the boundless universe. In the starry sky, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. At this moment he was a little excited. The reason why he immediately retreated was not because he was afraid of Nalan Ming. Of course, he was also very clear that with his current strength, there was definitely a big gap between him and Nalan Ming. This was because Nalan Ming had not used his full strength since the beginning. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and slowly closed his eyes. The reason why he hurriedly left was because he had a new realization, and that was instant invincibility. He felt that this instant invincibility could be improved. What should he improve? To improve the strength of the 4 afterimages and instant invincibility, Yi Xian suddenly stood up and stabbed out with his sword. His entire body directly escaped from this universe. In the next moment he directly entered an unknown spacetime domain. In this spacetime domain, Yi Xian glanced around and found that he had not only escaped from the existing universe, but also the boundless universe. This was a strange world. Yi Xian wanted to try to understand this spacetime, but he was shocked to find that his divine sense could not spread out at all. His entire body seemed to be in a black hole. This feeling made him a little panic. What kind of spacetime is this? After a long silence, Yi Xian collected his thoughts and suddenly drew his sword. Instant invincibility. At the moment of the sword strike, he was invincible. At this moment of invincibility, he carefully felt it and soon found that his entire body was shrouded by a mysterious power, but this mysterious power disappeared in an instant. Instant invincibility was not always invincible, but invincible at the moment when he drew his sword. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian looked at the 4 afterimages in the distance. He suddenly appeared in front of the 4 afterimages. When he carefully looked at the 4 afterimages, he was shocked to find that the afterimages were actually himself. Yi Xian was a little confused. Before this, he did not carefully observe the 4 afterimages. He did not expect that the 4 afterimages were actually him. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes and began to try to feel the 4 afterimages. After a moment, he was pleasantly surprised to find that he could actually connect with the 4 afterimages. This was really a great discovery. With a sudden thought from Yi Xian, countless human realm sword intents appeared in the surroundings. These human realm sword intents eventually flowed into the 4 afterimages. Gradually, the 4 afterimages actually dared to condense. Yi Xian was overjoyed and hurriedly released the human realm sword intents in a frenzy. In a short while, the 4 afterimages actually condensed into a solid image that looked exactly like him. It was as if they were clones. Looking at the 4 clones in front of him, Yi Xian suddenly said, slash. Slash. As soon as he said that, the 4 clones drew their swords at the same time and slashed. Swish. 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 4 rays of sword light slashed down in a straight line. Wherever the sword light landed, spacetime directly exploded. Immediately after, a destructive power erupted, and the surrounding starry sky began to shatter and be annihilated bit by bit. But soon a terrifying power appeared in the surroundings, and this power directly suppressed the scene. Yi Xian turned his head and glanced at the tomb owner again. The tomb owner was also looking at Yi Xian with a calm expression. Yi Xian retracted his gaze and took a deep breath. He was now sure that his instant of invincibility could be improved in all aspects. Not only that, but the 4 afterimages could also inherit his